In late December of 2003, Singapore was shaken by a rare and startling crime, the abduction of a 7-year-old girl from her family's home in Yio Chuang. This incident not only stunned the nation but also exposed vulnerabilities in a city celebrated for its safety. The masterminds behind this daring act were two men, Pinkun and Chua Sarene. At 35, Tan was struggling with severe financial problems, burdened by mounting debts and relentless creditors. Desperate, he confided in his close friend of 7 years, Chua, a 42-year-old owner of a cleaning business who was also drowning in his own financial woes, owing roughly 600,000 Singapore dollars. Faced with similar pressures, the two men considered various illegal options to ease their debts. They initially thought about drug trafficking but dismissed it due to the high risks involved. Instead, they devised a more sinister plan, kidnapping for ransom. Their target was the family of a managing director, a former business associate of Chua's childhood friend. They believed abducting one of the director's children could bring in a substantial ransom. On Christmas Day, December 25th, 2003, they chose to carry out their plan, betting that the festive season would make the family less vigilant. Tan and Chua drove to the residence in a car with fake license plates, noting that the gate was open and the household was busy preparing for the holiday. Chua, wearing a mask, stealthily entered the home, quickly abducted the 7-year-old girl from the living room, and hurried back to the waiting vehicle. They sped away, but their actions did not go unnoticed. The girl's brothers and a catering assistant saw the kidnapping, and the assistant's husband attempted to pursue the kidnappers. After a tense half-hour chase, realizing they were being followed, Tan and Chua decided to release the girl, who was unharmed and soon reunited with her family. Undeterred by their initial failure, the kidnappers contacted the girl's father the next day, demanding a ransom of 1 million Singapore dollars and threatening harm if their demands were not met. The father cooperated with the police, negotiating the ransom down to $70,000. On December 27th, the ransom was delivered at a designated spot along the Pan Island Expressway. Unaware to Tan and Chua, law enforcement had been monitoring their movements. Shortly after collecting the money, both men were arrested in Tampines, bringing their criminal scheme to an end. The incident sent shockwaves through Singaporean society, as kidnappings were exceedingly rare in the city-state. The brazen nature of the crime, especially during a festive period, left many in disbelief. The media extensively covered the case, examining the backgrounds of those involved and the circumstances that led to such a grave act. As legal proceedings began, the public eagerly awaited justice, recognizing the case as a stark reminder of how desperation can drive individuals to extreme measures. It also highlighted the crucial role of community vigilance and the efficiency of law enforcement in resolving such incidents swiftly. During the trial, both Tan and Chua faced charges of kidnapping for ransom, a serious offense under Singaporean law. The proceedings drew intense public attention, reflecting widespread concern over the incident. The case not only underscored the severity of the crime, but also prompted reflection on broader societal issues that can push individuals towards such dangerous actions. The rapid progression from arrest to courtroom demonstrated the strength of Singapore's legal system, reinforcing the message that criminal acts would be met with strict consequences. Discussions arose about the societal pressures and financial hardships that might lead someone to commit such acts, though the crime itself was inexcusable. The case of Tan Pinkun and Chua Sarene remains a significant chapter in Singapore's criminal history, serving as both a warning and a testament to the nation's dedication to justice and public safety. When Tan and Chua appeared before the judge, the courtroom was filled with journalists, members of the public, and legal experts, all eager to witness one of the most shocking kidnapping cases in recent memory. Given the gravity of abducting a child for ransom, there was no room for leniency. In Singapore, kidnapping for ransom is a capital offense, carrying the death penalty as the maximum punishment. From the start, the prosecution outlined how Tan and Chua had meticulously planned the crime, studying the victim's family and preparing the necessary tools. Chua had bought a mask and gloves to hide his identity, while Tan had altered the vehicle's license plates to avoid detection. The prosecution emphasized that this was a calculated act driven by greed and desperation, not an impulsive act. Evidence included recordings of ransom calls to the victim's father, where Chua's voice issued threats if demands were not met. As these chilling words echoed through the courtroom, silence fell, underscoring the seriousness of the offense. The case exemplified Singapore's firm stance against such crimes and reaffirmed the nation's commitment to justice and safety for all its citizens. The courtroom resonated with tense silence as the proceedings unfolded. The victim's father, a respected businessman, took the stand to recount the harrowing hours spent negotiating with the kidnappers. His voice quivered as he described the overwhelming fear he felt while pleading for his daughter's safe return. When confirmation finally arrived that his young girl had been found unharmed, a wave of relief washed over him, though he remained visibly shaken. The child herself did not testify, following advice from psychologists aimed at protecting her from further trauma. Instead, testimonies from her brothers and other witnesses painted a detailed picture of the abduction. One of the key witnesses, a catering assistant who had seen the event unfold, described how a masked man moved swiftly, how the girl had screamed, and how chaos erupted within the household in an instant. A crucial piece of evidence was the security footage from the ransom drop-off point. The grainy video captured Tan and Chua arriving in their vehicle, with Tan stepping out to retrieve a bag filled with cash before hurriedly leaving the scene. Undercover officers had immediately begun tracking their movements, leading to their eventual arrest in Tampines. The defense argued that financial hardship drove the men to commit the crime. They depicted Tan and Chua as individuals pushed to the edge by mounting debts and relentless creditors. Tan's lawyer appealed to the court, emphasizing his client's mental state at the time, suggesting desperation had clouded his judgment. Similarly, Chua's defense claimed he was influenced by Tan's manipulations and was not the mastermind behind the operation. However, the prosecution quickly refuted these claims, asserting that economic struggles did not justify such a serious crime. They pointed out that many Singaporeans face debt without resorting to kidnapping, and highlighted Chua's prior legal issues, including charges related to fraud, which indicated a pattern of willingness to break the law for personal gain. Throughout the trial, the judge listened carefully to both sides. Public opinion was largely against the accused, with media portraying them as dangerous offenders. The evidence was compelling, and the emotional state of the defendants was evident. Tan appeared emotionless, while Chua looked visibly distressed, often glancing at his family members with a mixture of shame and fear. As the proceedings continued, experts weighed in on the case, emphasizing the gravity of the crime and the importance of justice. The impact of the crime on the young victim was profound, with child psychologists emphasizing the lasting psychological scars. Although she had been physically unharmed, the trauma she endured could take years to heal. In the weeks following her kidnapping, she suffered from persistent nightmares and intense anxiety, refusing to be left alone and constantly seeking reassurance from her parents. Beyond the personal toll on the girl and her family, the incident sent shockwaves through Singapore, a country renowned for its low crime rates and strict laws. The nation, unaccustomed to such high-profile cases, saw parents become more vigilant, schools ramped up security measures, and public discussions about safety grew more frequent. While the police successfully apprehended the perpetrators and recovered the ransom money, some questioned whether authorities could have acted more decisively to prevent the crime altogether. The government responded by reaffirming Singapore's reputation as one of the safest nations, yet officials also warned that complacency could be dangerous. The case underscored the importance of ongoing vigilance from both law enforcement and the community to prevent similar incidents in the future. Meanwhile, in Changi Prison, Tan and Chua awaited their sentencing, fully aware of the gravity of their actions and the likelihood of severe punishment. In Singapore, kidnapping for ransom is met with zero tolerance, carrying the penalty of death. Despite this, whispers circulated that the court might show some leniency, given that the victim was released unharmed and their plan had been executed hastily and ultimately failed. Some legal experts speculated that the judge might opt for life imprisonment rather than capital punishment, considering these mitigating factors. As the trial drew to a close, a key question hung in the air. Would Tan and Chua face execution or serve a lesser sentence? The upcoming verdict would not only determine their fate, but also serve as a stern warning to others contemplating similar crimes. Throughout the proceedings, the case of Pinkun and Chua Sarene had captivated the nation for weeks, with major news outlets covering every detail of the crime, the trial, and the legal arguments. Now, as the judge prepared to deliver his judgment, the gravity of the offense was unmistakable. Kidnapping for ransom remained one of the most serious violations under Singaporean law, punishable by death. The act of abducting a child, even without physical harm, threatened the nation's peace and security, revealing both premeditation and a blatant disregard for the law. In a courtroom filled with tense silence, Pinkun and Chua Sarene stood motionless as the judge delivered his verdict. He condemned their reckless act of kidnapping a young girl to extort money from her terrified family, emphasizing the profound trauma inflicted on the child and the immense fear endured by her loved ones. The judge also condemned the blatant disregard both men had shown for the law and societal norms. He dismissed their defense, which claimed that financial hardship had driven them to commit such a crime, asserting that economic difficulties could never justify terrorizing an innocent child. When the judge finally announced the sentence, the entire courtroom held its breath. Tan and Chua were found guilty of kidnapping for ransom. However, instead of the death penalty, the judge chose a sentence of life imprisonment coupled with caning. Tan received the maximum of 24 strokes, while Chua was sentenced to 20. This decision was unusual, as Singapore's legal system is known for its strict approach to serious offenses. Nonetheless, the court considered mitigating factors such as the child's safe release and the relatively brief duration of the abduction, which likely influenced the judge's choice. Still, both men faced the prospect of spending their remaining days behind bars, a fate many viewed as more severe than death. As the verdict was read, Chua lowered his head, shoulders slumping in defeat. Throughout the trial, he had appeared visibly remorseful, exchanging glances with family members and showing signs of understanding the gravity of his actions. Tan, in contrast, remained stoic, showing no reaction or emotion, whether from resignation, defiance, or shock was uncertain. Outside the courtroom, public opinion was swift and divided. Some believed justice had been served, considering life imprisonment a fitting punishment, while others felt the men should have received the death penalty to serve as a stronger warning against such crimes. Legal experts debated whether this ruling signaled a shift in Singapore's approach to serious offenses or if it was simply an exceptional case due to its specific circumstances. The victim's family, though relieved that the ordeal had ended, remained deeply shaken. While their daughter was physically unharmed, the emotional scars would take time to heal. In interviews after the trial, her father expressed gratitude to authorities, but also hoped that no other family would have to endure such suffering. Meanwhile, inside Changi Prison, Tan and Chua faced a harsh new reality. Life behind bars was grueling, with long, monotonous days filled with hard labor and strict discipline. The caning, a brutal punishment that leaves lasting scars, was carried out shortly after sentencing. Many inmates describe judicial caning as one of the most excruciating pains they have ever experienced, a stark reminder of the severe consequences for their actions. The precise strikes delivered by a trained officer could carve deep wounds into flesh, leaving scars that would take weeks to heal. Such punishment served not only as a penalty, but also as a lasting reminder of the crimes committed. For Tan and Chua, life behind bars offered little relief, no luxuries, no comforts, and no hope for early release. In Singapore, a life sentence truly meant spending the rest of one's natural life incarcerated, unless the president granted clemency, a rare exception in serious cases. Over time, both men faded from public awareness. Media coverage shifted elsewhere, and their high-profile case became just another chapter in the nation's criminal history. Yet, within Changi Prison, the consequences of their actions remained unavoidable. Tan, the main instigator, maintained a hardened exterior, speaking sparingly and keeping to himself. His former life as a gambler and businessman seemed distant now. Chua, however, struggled more profoundly. Those who encountered him inside the prison described a man weighed down by remorse, often reflecting on the family he had disappointed and the life he had discarded. Outside Singapore, vigilance remained high. The case had reinforced the country's unwavering commitment to law and order. Parents grew more protective, schools adopted stricter security measures, and authorities continued to monitor organized crime threats. Time helped heal some wounds, but the memories of that harrowing day would never fully fade. The victim grew up knowing that, for a fleeting moment in her childhood, she had been caught at the heart of a national crisis, used as leverage by two desperate men. Despite this, she moved forward, attending school and eventually building her own life. The echoes of the past served as a stark reminder that crime, though rare in Singapore, could still occur. Yet it also reaffirmed the city-state's swift and firm justice. Tan and Chua had gambled with their freedom and lost everything. With the passing years, their names became symbols of caution, two men who chose the wrong path and paid the ultimate price. In January of 2004, Indonesia faced a high-profile case that captured national attention. The incident involved a violent clash between two notorious gang leaders, John K. and Bos Sanghaji, both prominent figures within Jakarta's underworld. This confrontation not only revealed the brutal nature of gang rivalries, but also highlighted the difficulties law enforcement faced in curbing organized crime. John K., born John Refra in the Maluku Islands, had established himself as a formidable figure in Jakarta's criminal scene. He was reputed to be involved in various illicit activities, exemplifying the ongoing challenges in tackling organized crime networks. Deeply embedded in Jakarta's underworld, his influence extended through a web of criminal activities, including extortion, protection rackets, and alleged ties to violent incidents. His network of loyal associates was ready to enforce his will, maintaining control over various illicit enterprises. Among his rivals was Bosir Sanghaji, another prominent figure from Moku, who had established his own territory within the city. Like his counterpart, Sanghaji engaged in similar illegal ventures, fueling a long-standing rivalry rooted in disputes over territorial dominance and business interests. This rivalry was widely recognized by law enforcement and the public alike, with tensions simmering for years. On January 12, 2004, these tensions erupted into a violent clash in central Jakarta. The confrontation was fierce, involving firearms, machetes, and other weapons, leaving chaos in its wake. Witnesses described scenes of brutality, with members of both factions fighting fiercely, resulting in multiple injuries and property damage. In the immediate aftermath, police responded swiftly, deploying officers to contain the violence and prevent further escalation. Several individuals from both sides were detained, and a cache of weapons was confiscated. The authorities faced mounting pressure to bring those responsible to justice and dismantle the criminal networks behind such brazen violence. Investigations revealed that the conflict was not impulsive, but the result of years of rivalry and competition for control over Jakarta's underground economy. Further scrutiny into the backgrounds of both leaders uncovered a complex web of criminal activities spanning many years. John K., one of the key figures, was arrested and faced charges related to the violent incident. The legal proceedings that followed drew significant media attention, highlighting the difficulties faced by Indonesia's justice system in prosecuting organized crime figures. Despite the gravity of the accusations, the case proved lengthy and complicated, involving numerous hearings and appeals. The January 2004 clash served as a stark reminder of the pervasive influence organized crime wielded within Indonesia. It underscored the urgent need for comprehensive strategies to combat such entrenched networks and expose the systemic challenges law enforcement encountered in tackling deeply rooted illicit enterprises. The incident also sparked discussions about socioeconomic factors contributing to the rise of such figures and the systemic reforms necessary to prevent similar conflicts. In the years that followed, both John K. and his associates remained under close law enforcement scrutiny. Their ongoing activities and legal battles continued to attract public interest, reflecting the persistent struggle between authorities and organized crime networks. The events of January DV Tisiachi Chedir in Indonesia mark a pivotal chapter in the ongoing struggle against organized crime, illustrating the complex web of conflicts that can erupt between rival factions. Following a violent clash between the gangs led by John K. and Sangaji, Jakarta was engulfed in an atmosphere of fear and uncertainty. The brutality of the confrontation left deep scars not only on those directly involved, but also on the city itself. Businesses in the affected districts hesitated to reopen, fearing retaliation, while residents chose to stay indoors, unwilling to risk becoming caught in the crossfire of potential reprisals. In response, law enforcement agencies, under intense public and governmental pressure, launched a vigorous crackdown on the criminal networks that had operated with little oversight for years. Authorities swiftly conducted raids across Jakarta, targeting known hideouts, warehouses, and properties linked to the gangs. During these operations, police seized a significant cache of illegal firearms, blades, and documents, revealing widespread extortion and corruption. A police chief publicly vowed to bring those responsible to justice, emphasizing that the city could not be held hostage by organized crime. The two main figures, John K. and Sangaji, were quickly identified as the primary instigators of the violence. However, capturing them proved difficult, as both had gone into hiding, leveraging extensive networks of allies and sympathizers to evade arrest. Rumors circulated about their possible locations. Some claimed John K. had fled to another province, while others suggested Sangaji was hiding in a heavily guarded estate owned by a powerful businessman. Despite their elusive whereabouts, it was clear that the conflict between these criminal empires was far from over. Investigators began unraveling the series of events that led to the deadly clash, discovering a complex web of betrayals, power struggles, and long-standing vendettas. Central to the conflict was a dispute over lucrative debt collection contracts, a business both men heavily invested in. These contracts, often operating in legal gray areas, involved using intimidation and force to recover unpaid debts for wealthy clients, with millions of rupees at stake. Tensions had been simmering for months as each faction sought to dominate territory and influence. The immediate trigger for the January violence, however, was a calculated move by Sangaji's men. According to testimonies from informants and intercepted communications, Sangaji had ordered a direct assault on one of John K.'s most trusted enforcers. The attack was brutal. A high-ranking lieutenant was ambushed outside a nightclub, stabbed multiple times, and left bleeding on the street. This calculated act of violence was intended to send a stark message, escalating the ongoing rivalry and igniting the deadly confrontation that would leave a lasting mark on Jakarta's criminal landscape. Following the attack, the act was perceived as an unforgivable provocation that demanded an immediate, forceful response. John K., unwilling to accept any challenge, swiftly mobilized his forces. What ensued was a carefully orchestrated counteroffensive that culminated in a confrontation on January 12th. Unlike earlier skirmishes, which had been relatively contained, this clash erupted in a densely populated district, making it impossible for authorities to ignore. The chaos was deafening. Gunfire reverberated through the streets, machetes clashed, and bystanders scrambled for safety as violence spiraled out of control. Several gang members on both sides sustained serious injuries, and at least one person was confirmed as a casualty within hours. The ferocity of the fighting compelled Jakarta's law enforcement to act decisively. Special units were deployed swiftly, and within hours they managed to disperse the combat and arrest multiple individuals from both factions. Despite these efforts, John K. and Sangaji managed to evade capture, slipping into the shadows of the city they had long controlled. For weeks, authorities pursued every lead, monitoring surveillance footage, infiltrating known hideouts, and pressuring those suspected of aiding the fugitives. The government even hinted at possible military involvement if the situation worsened, highlighting the crisis's gravity. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some feared the unchecked power of these gangs, while others saw K and Sangaji as necessary figures within the city's underworld, harsh but integral to Jakarta's complex social fabric. Many viewed them as modern Robin Hood-like figures who, despite their violence, provided protection and support to their communities. This perception made it even more difficult for law enforcement to gather reliable information, as many witnesses refused cooperation out of loyalty or fear of retaliation. In a surprising turn, John Kay was finally apprehended. Acting on an anonymous tip, police raided a secluded villa on the city's outskirts where he had been hiding. The operation was swift and tense. His men resisted briefly, engaging in a standoff before being overwhelmed. When officers entered, they found Kay sitting calmly in a leather chair, seemingly unfazed. As he was led away in handcuffs, media captured every moment of his arrest. He showed no resistance, wearing a confident expression, as if aware that this was merely another chapter in a larger conflict. Some speculated that he had allowed himself to be caught, believing his influence would persist even behind bars. Meanwhile, Sangaji remained at large. Despite multiple raids and an intensified manhunt, he seemed to have vanished without a trace. Rumors swirled that he had escaped the country, while others claimed he remained within Indonesia, protected by influential allies. Law enforcement agencies pressed on with their pursuit, but as weeks turned into months, the trail grew cold, leaving many to wonder if he would ever be captured. Meanwhile, with John Kay in custody, prosecutors prepared their case against him, charging him with multiple crimes, including inciting violence, illegal possession of weapons, and orchestrating organized criminal activities. The subsequent trial would become one of the most highly publicized legal battles in Indonesian history, attracting intense media attention and public interest. Despite Kay's incarceration, the criminal empire he helped build remained resilient. His loyal followers stayed committed, and his influence persisted in Jakarta's underground. Without a decisive strike to dismantle his network, many feared that the cycle of violence would soon reignite. The absence of Bosi Sangaji created an unsettling void, hinting either at his eventual return or the rise of a new, even more ruthless figure in Jakarta's criminal scene. As John Kay awaited his trial behind bars, Jakarta's underworld remained as unpredictable as ever. His arrest had sent shockwaves through the criminal community, yet it had not toppled the organization. Instead, his temporary absence created a power vacuum that both old and emerging factions eagerly sought to fill. Rumors circulated on the streets. Some believed Kay's organization would collapse without his leadership, while others insisted his influence was far from over. Loyalists continued operating covertly, ensuring that activities such as extortion, debt collection, and protection rackets persisted without interruption. Even in prison, Kay maintained communication with his network through trusted intermediaries, keeping his grip on the operations intact. Meanwhile, Bosi Sangaji's disappearance deepened the uncertainty. For months, authorities pursued every lead, but he remained elusive. Some speculated he had fled abroad under a false identity, aided by wealthy allies, while others believed he had been secretly eliminated by his own men, who saw his reckless behavior as a threat. There were also whispers that he was still hiding in Jakarta, biding his time for a comeback. Without a clear leader, a tense quiet settled over the criminal underworld. The chaos of open gang conflicts had temporarily subsided, but everyone understood this peace was fragile. In the absence of direct violence, the struggle for control shifted into the shadows. Silent assassinations, strategic betrayals, and covert power plays became the new battleground. Law enforcement, sensing an opportunity to finally dismantle these networks, intensified their efforts with more raids and investigations, aiming to bring the entire organization to its knees. Despite numerous arrests targeting both the Kay and Sangaji factions, the roots of organized crime in Jakarta remained deeply entrenched. Many detainees managed to evade severe punishment through financial influence, intimidation, or corruption, effectively bending the justice system to their will. The trial of John Kay transformed into a spectacle, with media outlets dissecting every detail and elevating him to a near mythical status, either as a feared criminal mastermind or a misunderstood figure, depending on the perspective. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed him as a ruthless enforcer who had dominated Jakarta's underworld with an iron grip, while others saw him as a victim of a broken system where violence and corruption were the only means of survival. The courtroom was consistently crowded with reporters, family members, and curious spectators eager to witness the proceedings. Prosecutors presented a substantial body of evidence linking John K. to violent acts, illegal weapons possession, and orchestrated acts of intimidation. Witnesses were called, some reluctantly, fearing retaliation, and others refusing to testify altogether, either out of loyalty or fear. The defense argued that John K. was being unfairly targeted, a scapegoat for law enforcement's desperation to appear in control. They questioned the credibility of certain testimonies and pointed out inconsistencies, suggesting that the true masterminds behind Jakarta's violence remained at large, protected by influential figures who had long evaded justice. Despite the fierce legal battle, the outcome was clear. Overwhelming evidence led to John K.'s conviction on multiple charges, and the judge sentenced him to many years behind bars. Yet, even as the verdict was announced, there was no sense of finality or celebration. Everyone understood that his imprisonment did not mark the end of the conflict. Rather, it signaled a shift in the ongoing struggle. In the days following, Jakarta's criminal landscape began to change once more, with new leaders eager to seize the territories left vulnerable in K's absence. Some of his closest allies attempted to maintain control, but fractures soon appeared, disputes over territory, shifting alliances, and betrayals becoming commonplace. Meanwhile, rumors of Sanghaji's return started circulating. Some claimed to have seen him in secret meetings, while others insisted he was merely a myth, a ghost haunting the city's underworld. His absence, whether real or orchestrated, created an atmosphere of uncertainty that no one could ignore. For Jakarta's residents, life continued, but an unspoken truth persisted. The city had always been governed by shadows, and no matter how many arrests were made, the underlying power structures remained intact. Throughout history, the existence of shadows, those unseen remnants of past conflicts, remains an enduring mystery. Whether trials were conducted or individuals imprisoned, these shadows never truly fade, lingering as silent witnesses to unresolved struggles. The story of John K. and Bos Sanghaji exemplifies this ongoing struggle. It was not merely about two men, but about the complex, often inescapable interplay between authority and violence, legality and corruption. Such narratives have repeated countless times, and likely will continue to do so long after those involved are gone. Over the years, one question persisted: had the conflict truly concluded, or was it merely waiting for a new chapter to unfold? In January of 2004, Indonesia was rocked by a high-profile criminal case that captured widespread attention. It involved the murder of Bodhardo Anono, the president-director of PT Asaba, a leading office equipment company. This incident not only exposed the vulnerabilities faced by business leaders, but also highlighted the intricate challenges faced by investigators in the country. Anono was a respected figure in the business community, recognized for his leadership and industry contributions. His sudden death sent shockwaves through corporate circles and raised concerns about the safety of prominent individuals in Indonesia. The circumstances surrounding the murder were both shocking and mysterious. Initial reports suggested that Anono had been targeted in a deliberate attack, sparking widespread speculation about the motives. Was it driven by business rivalry, personal vendettas, or something else entirely? These questions loomed large as authorities launched their investigation. Law enforcement agencies faced intense pressure to resolve the case swiftly, while the media closely followed every development, demanding justice for the victim. Investigators worked diligently, analyzing evidence, interviewing witnesses, and exploring various leads to unravel the mystery surrounding Anono's death. As the inquiry advanced, several individuals emerged as persons of interest. Authorities examined Anono's professional and personal relationships, searching for clues that might reveal the motive or identify the perpetrator. The case's complexity required a careful, methodical approach, as investigators navigated through multiple layers of potential suspects and motives. By late January, the investigation reached a crucial turning point when the main suspect was brought to trial. The courtroom was filled with journalists, legal experts, and members of the public, all eager to see justice served. The trial aimed to answer the many questions that had arisen since the murder, seeking to deliver clarity and accountability. The prosecution presented a case based on forensic evidence, witness testimonies, and circumstantial details, striving to establish a direct link between the defendant and the crime. They sought to clarify the sequence of events leading to the murder and to uncover the underlying motive. Meanwhile, the defense team aimed to cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative, challenging the evidence and suggesting alternative explanations. The proceedings underscored the ongoing struggle to uncover truth amid layers of complexity, reflecting the broader themes of power, influence, and justice that continue to shape Indonesia's social landscape. As the trial progressed, doubts about the strength of the evidence prompted both sides to challenge each other's claims, revealing the case's surprising complexity. New information surfaced, adding further layers to the unfolding story, while legal teams engaged in intense debates, each aiming to influence the jury's decision. The public watched closely as the proceedings touched on broader themes of justice, security, and law enforcement in Indonesia. Anticipation grew for the verdict, with many hoping it would finally resolve a case that had captured national attention for years. Regardless of the outcome, the investigation into Bod Hardoino's death in January of 2004 remains a pivotal chapter in the country's legal history, illustrating the difficulties faced in delivering true justice. In the courtroom, silence reigned as the prosecution laid out the detailed facts of the case. Their lead attorney, known for sharp reasoning and thorough preparation, quickly presented forensic evidence linking the suspect to the crime. They described how the crime scene had been carefully examined, with every piece of evidence scrutinized to establish a clear sequence of events. Blood spatter analysis indicated the victim had been attacked from behind, possibly by someone familiar with the attack angle, suggesting a deliberate and planned assault rather than a spontaneous act of violence. A crucial piece of evidence was the murder weapon, a knife recovered from a nearby drain. Fingerprints on the handle matched those of the primary suspect, a former employee of PT Asaba named Andika Pipta. He had worked for nearly 10 years under Eno before being dismissed amid allegations of financial misconduct. The prosecution argued that Andika harbored a deep resentment, meticulously planning his revenge. Supporting this theory, investigators found surveillance footage from an ATM close to the victim's home. The grainy video showed a figure resembling Andika walking toward Eno's residence on the night of the murder, though his face was partially hidden by a cap. Forensic experts enhanced the footage, identifying facial features that closely resembled Andika. Further evidence came from phone records, which revealed that Andika had made multiple attempts to contact Eno in the weeks before the attack, suggesting premeditation. Witness testimonies also strengthened the case. A security guard near the victim's house recalled seeing a tense, anxious man pacing near the entrance around the estimated time of death. Although he could not describe the individual precisely, his impression aligned with the suspect's behavior. This combination of forensic surveillance and eyewitness evidence painted a compelling picture of deliberate planning, yet the defense questioned the reliability of some findings and sought alternative explanations. The trial's outcome remained uncertain, but the case underscored the complexities inherent in seeking justice and the importance of thorough investigation in the face of conflicting narratives. That night, a woman walking her dog testified that she heard raised voices coming from Eno's house, followed by sounds of a struggle. Moments later, she claimed to have seen a man fleeing the scene, though she admitted she could not identify him due to the darkness. Despite mounting evidence against Andika, the defense quickly argued that the case was largely circumstantial. Their seasoned lawyer pointed out inconsistencies in the prosecution's timeline and emphasized that forensic evidence, while persuasive, did not conclusively prove Andika's guilt. For example, the fingerprints on the murder weapon could have been transferred through secondary contact, and the low-resolution surveillance footage made it impossible to definitively identify the suspect. In a surprising development, the defense introduced an alternative theory. They suggested that the murder was not driven by personal revenge, but was instead a targeted operation orchestrated by unknown individuals with a motive to silence the victim. They highlighted that Eno's involvement in several high-stakes business deals, some with disputes involving influential figures, might have made him a target for those seeking to eliminate him for financial or political reasons. This revelation shocked the courtroom, casting the case in a new, more complex light, one that linked the death to possible corporate or political intrigue. Further evidence was presented indicating that Eno had expressed concerns about his safety in the months before his death. Close associates testified that he had confided in them about receiving anonymous threats, though he never revealed who was behind them. Adding to the intrigue, key documents reportedly went missing from Eno's office shortly after his passing. An insider revealed that these documents contained sensitive financial information that could implicate prominent figures in corrupt dealings. The defense argued that this suggested a cover-up, and that blaming Andika was merely a way to divert attention from the true perpetrators. As the trial advanced, public perception shifted. What initially appeared to be a straightforward case of workplace revenge now seemed intertwined with darker, more sinister motives. The question arose, was Andika truly guilty, or was he being used as a scapegoat in a broader conspiracy? If Eno's death was motivated by reasons beyond personal revenge, who stood to gain the most? The prosecution maintained that the evidence against Andika was too compelling to dismiss, dismissing the conspiracy theory as an elaborate distraction and insisting that no concrete proof linked anyone else to the crime. The case surrounding the son's involvement in his father's death grew increasingly complex as more testimonies emerged, blurring the line between fact and speculation with each passing day. New revelations hinted at deeper ties between the deceased's work and influential figures in the business world, adding layers of intrigue to the investigation. Despite these developments, the core question persisted: who was truly responsible for Bodhardo and Sono's death, and what motivated such an act? As the trial drew toward its conclusion, the responsibility of the jury became paramount. The evidence presented by both sides was compelling, yet it was ultimately their task to decide whether Andika Preda was guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. A conviction could mean life imprisonment, while an acquittal would leave the case unresolved, fueling ongoing debates about justice and fairness. The courtroom atmosphere grew tense as the final days approached, thick with anticipation, frustration, and uncertainty. Outside crowds gathered, divided in their beliefs, some convinced of Andika's guilt, others convinced he was merely a pawn in a larger, darker scheme. In preparation for their closing arguments, both prosecution and defense knew that every word could influence the jury's decision. The prosecution maintained that Andika had both motive and opportunity, supported by forensic evidence. They highlighted key points. First, the fingerprints on the murder weapon, which, despite attempts to cast doubt, were found only on items linked directly to Andika, with no signs of transfer. Second, grainy surveillance footage showed a figure matching Andika's height, build, and gait approaching the victim's residence. Third, financial records revealed that Andika was under significant debt following his dismissal from PT Asaba, suggesting possible resentment. Perhaps most damaging was a witness statement from a former colleague who hesitantly testified that Andika had confided in him weeks before the incident, expressing anger towards the victim and making cryptic remarks about settling their differences. Although the defense argued that these statements were vague and open to interpretation, the prosecution contended that, combined with physical evidence, they painted a picture of a man meticulously planning his revenge. As the defense prepared their final argument, they aimed to dismantle the prosecution's case, emphasizing the ambiguities and questioning the reliability of the evidence. The outcome rested on the jury's judgment, who had to weigh the facts carefully to determine whether justice had truly been served in this intricate and emotionally charged case. The prosecution's case was methodically presented, beginning with surveillance footage that showed no direct evidence of the suspect entering Ano's residence or committing the crime. Instead, they argued that in a city of millions, many men could resemble Anda, and the footage only confirmed his presence nearby. The prosecution also revisited missing financial documents from PT Asaba, questioning why crucial records vanished after Ano's death if the murder was truly a crime of passion. They highlighted that Ano had been receiving threats in the months leading up to his death, suggesting a deeper, more complex motive. If the case was truly about revenge, they contended, it overlooked the larger puzzle at play. The defense took a daring approach, emphasizing that if even a slight doubt remained about Anda's guilt, he could not be convicted. They underscored that reasonable doubt is the cornerstone of justice, and if there was any chance another person was involved, the jury must consider that possibility. After weeks filled with intense testimonies, forensic analyses, and passionate debates, the case was handed to the jury for deliberation. The process was expected to be lengthy, given the gravity of the decision, and silence fell over the courtroom as everyone awaited the verdict. Outside journalists debated the case, social media was abuzz with theories, and public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Anda as a disgruntled employee who snapped in a moment of rage, while others believed he was a scapegoat for a crime rooted in more sinister motives. When the jury finally returned, the entire court held its breath. The judge asked the foreperson to read the verdict on the charge of first-degree murder. The foreperson's voice was steady but tense as they announced, "We find the defendant." A long pause followed, heightening the tension. Then came the words, "Not guilty." A wave of shock rippled through the courtroom. Gasps and murmurs erupted as Anda's face remained impassive, as if struggling to grasp what had just happened. Gradually, realization set in, and he exhaled audibly, tears welling in his eyes. His legal team embraced him in relief, while prosecutors stood frozen in disbelief. The judge called for order as some spectators expressed outrage, while others celebrated. Anda was now a free man, but the case was far from closed. The verdict did not equate to justice served. It merely indicated that the evidence was insufficient to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The media quickly analyzed the outcome, with some headlines calling it a failure of the justice system, while others commended the jury for withholding conviction without absolute proof. One fact remained clear: the mystery surrounding Ano's death persisted. If Anda was not the perpetrator, then who was responsible, and more importantly, would the true culprit ever be uncovered? In early 2003, the city of Anan in the province of Liaoning was a thriving industrial center, renowned for its steel manufacturing and diligent residents. Daily life followed a steady rhythm, with factory shifts shaping the routines of its people. Yet beneath this veneer of normalcy, a series of unsettling events began to unfold, casting a dark shadow over the city. Born in 1965 in Anan, Jean had recently been released from prison after serving time for a different offense. Eager to rebuild his life, he took up work as a taxi driver, a profession offering flexibility and the chance to interact with a diverse array of passengers. To neighbors and acquaintances, Jean appeared to be a man trying to start anew, a familiar story in a city where many faced hardships. However, as the summer of 2003 advanced, Anan was rocked by a disturbing pattern. Women passengers started to vanish without a trace, often during late-night rides they had hailed from the city streets. Anxiety spread among residents, and whispers of a predator targeting women circulated rapidly. Authorities initially dismissed these incidents as isolated, but soon a pattern emerged pointing to a serial offender. Jean earned a chilling nickname, the Anan Taxi Devil. His method was both clever and brutal. Under the guise of a friendly driver, he would pick up women during night shifts, engaging them in casual conversation to gain their trust. Once in secluded areas, claiming to take shortcuts or avoid traffic, he would use a concealed rope to strangle his victims. Afterward, he would dispose of the bodies in discreet locations, abandoned lots, deserted roads, or disused wells, places where discovery was unlikely. Between June and July, the number of disappearances grew alarmingly. In just a few weeks, 6 women vanished under eerily similar circumstances, fueling a climate of fear. The city's atmosphere became tense, with residents increasingly cautious about traveling alone after dark. The once busy taxi industry saw a sharp decline, as people preferred alternative transportation or chose to stay indoors, wary of the unseen threat lurking in the shadows. Following the incident, local law enforcement faced intense pressure to identify and capture the perpetrator. The pattern of the crime suggested that the attacker possessed an in-depth knowledge of the city's layout and operated with a confidence that implied familiarity with police procedures. As investigators gathered clues, they focused on taxi drivers with prior criminal records or suspicious behavior. The task was daunting, given the high volume of taxis in Anhan and the transient nature of the profession. As the investigation progressed, authorities urged the public to stay vigilant, issuing safety advice such as avoiding solo travel at night and sharing ride details with trusted contacts. Taxi companies were instructed to tighten driver screening processes and install identification displays inside vehicles to reassure passengers. Despite these efforts, Joan managed to evade capture, becoming increasingly bold with each passing day. The breakthrough came in late November of 2003, when a young woman, aware of the widespread reports about the taxi attacker, noticed her driver acting strangely and taking an unusual route. Sensing danger, she discreetly sent her location to a friend via text. When she failed to respond to follow-up messages, her friend alerted authorities. A swift police response led to the arrest of Zan, who was caught in the act of attempting to overpower the passenger. During questioning, Zan remained unnervingly calm and confessed to the crimes, providing detailed accounts of each incident and revealing where he had disposed of the victim's remains. This led investigators to the grim discovery of 6 women's bodies. The city of Anhan was shaken to its core as the full extent of Zan's actions was revealed. Legal proceedings moved quickly given the severity of his crimes and the overwhelming evidence. On the 13th of January 2004, Zan was convicted of multiple murders and subsequently executed, ending a dark chapter that left a lasting impact on the community's collective memory. His case serves as a stark reminder of the potential for darkness within individuals and highlights the importance of community vigilance. It also underscores the vital role law enforcement plays in swiftly addressing emerging threats to public safety. For the residents of Anhan, the story of the taxi attacker remains a poignant part of their history, symbolizing both the resilience of the community and the ongoing need for awareness. Although Zan's arrest alleviated the immediate danger, the psychological scars from the ordeal persisted, leaving many residents haunted by the memories of those tragic events. The young women whose lives were cut short left behind memories that haunted their loved ones, casting a long shadow over the community. It seemed as though the streets of Anshan, once lively and full of activity, had transformed into quiet, unsettling spaces, a stark reminder that danger can hide in the most unexpected places. After Joe's arrest, authorities dedicated themselves to retracing his steps, carefully unraveling the twisted pattern behind his crimes. They examined his taxi records in detail, cross-referencing his movements with reports of missing persons, quickly revealing that Joe's actions were far from random. His calculated approach suggested a methodical mind, one intent on avoiding any evidence that could link him to his victims. Investigators discovered that Joe had modified his vehicle by removing its seats, making it easier to restrain and conceal his victims' remains. The investigation showed that he primarily targeted women he considered vulnerable, those traveling alone late at night, often after work or social outings. The isolation and routine of his victims made it easier for him to carry out his sinister plans. His job as a taxi driver provided him with access to detailed information about their routines, which he exploited under the guise of being a friendly driver, lulling his passengers into a false sense of security, a tactic that repeatedly worked. The discovery of the victims' bodies in abandoned fields and remote areas marked a somber turning point in the case as authorities pieced together the extent of Joe's depravity. Only after his confession did the full horror of his actions come to light. The families of the women were devastated, their grief casting a heavy pall over the city. As news spread, anger and a desire for justice grew among residents who felt betrayed by the fact that such a predator had operated so close to home. His profession, which had seemed to offer him a perfect cover, left many feeling vulnerable and betrayed by their own sense of safety. The public's reaction to Joe's arrest and subsequent trial was intense. Media outlets from across China flocked to Anshan, eager to cover every detail of the case. The trial, held in early January of 2004, became a national spectacle. Discussions centered on how someone like Joe could have evaded detection for so long and whether the city's police and taxi industry had done enough to protect its citizens. The families of the victims also drew significant attention, their calls for justice resonating throughout the courtroom. Throughout the proceedings, Joe appeared indifferent and unrepentant, showing little remorse despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. His demeanor was cold and detached, almost as if he viewed the entire process as an inconvenient formality. His defense team argued that his actions stemmed from a disturbed mind, but the evidence and the pain inflicted on the families painted a clear picture of his heinous crimes. Despite claims of a troubled upbringing and psychological struggles, the prosecution swiftly dismissed these defenses, emphasizing instead the brutality and calculated nature of the murders. The evidence was overwhelming, clearly showing that Joe meticulously planned each abduction with precision, leaving little doubt about his intent. The trial marked the culmination of months of investigation and mounting fear, and the final verdict was expected to bring closure to a dark chapter in Anand's history that would not soon be forgotten. As the sentencing day approached, tension filled the atmosphere, and Joe's fate appeared sealed. His crimes were deemed too severe and his actions too deliberate to warrant mercy. In the weeks leading up to his execution, discussions about capital punishment intensified, with many believing that such a harsh penalty was the only appropriate response to his heinous deeds. Joe's execution, carried out in mid-January of the year 2004, served as a stark message from the state that such acts of barbarity would not be tolerated. As he was led into the execution chamber, he showed no visible emotion. Some speculated that he was either too detached to care or had come to terms with his impending fate. Others wondered whether in those final moments he might have experienced even a hint of the fear and helplessness his victims had endured. While the streets of Anand gradually returned to a semblance of normality, the shadow of Joe's crimes persisted. The city was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. A predator had been living among them, hidden in plain sight. In the aftermath, calls arose for greater accountability within the taxi industry, including more rigorous driver checks and improved systems for tracking movements. Authorities were urged to enhance their efforts in preventing such crimes, implementing new protocols for investigating missing persons and prioritizing public safety. Yet, for the families of the victims, no amount of reform could restore their loved ones, daughters, sisters, friends. Their grief remained a constant presence, and although the community began to heal, it would never be the same. The memory of Joe and his cold, methodical killings would forever be etched into the collective consciousness of Anand, serving as a haunting reminder of life's fragility and the lurking dangers in unexpected places. The case of Zan became a significant chapter in China's criminal history, not only for the horror of the crimes, but also for exposing vulnerabilities in the systems designed to protect the public. The tragedy united communities in ways they had never anticipated, and while justice was ultimately served, it left a deep scar on the city of Anand that time could not fully heal. In the years following Zan's execution, the city slowly began to recover, though it would never be entirely the same. The echoes of his crimes lingered in the streets, and the vacant eyes of his victims remained forever imprinted in the minds of residents. The tragedies had left an indelible mark on the community's collective memory, a stark reminder of the darkness that can sometimes hide behind everyday facades. The event left an indelible imprint on Anand's collective consciousness, a profound scar that revealed the darkest facets of human nature. Yet, as time progressed, the city's taxi industry underwent significant reforms. New regulations were introduced and safety protocols tightened. Authorities worked diligently to rebuild trust within a community shattered by betrayal, striving to restore a sense of security. Despite these efforts, a lingering unease persisted, fueled by the awareness that someone like Joe, who had once lurked unnoticed among them, could still be among the population. This realization prompted increased vigilance and wariness in everyday life. For the families of Zen's victims, healing was a slow, painful journey. They found themselves trapped in an endless cycle of grief and longing, their wounds never fully closing. Memories of their daughters, filled with love and sadness, were recounted with a bittersweet mixture of joy and sorrow. Their stories served as a poignant reminder to the community of the importance of vigilance, care, and safeguarding one's loved ones. While the legal case was officially closed, for these families the pain persisted, a personal devastation that no verdict could truly mend. Over the years, Anand gradually changed. The once lively streets now carried an undercurrent of caution, especially when traveling alone at night. The community, scarred by the events of the summer of 2003, grew closer and more protective of one another. There was a collective effort to support each other, ensuring that darkness would not overshadow their shared pursuit of safety. The city seemed quieter, more somber, yet within this quietness lay a palpable sense of shared loss. The police force, initially criticized for its inability to prevent the tragedies, began to reform. More resources were allocated to investigations, and public confidence in law enforcement slowly recovered. Reports of taxi drivers involved in serious crimes diminished, and many viewed these reforms as necessary, albeit difficult, steps toward preventing future tragedies. However, the scars inflicted by Joe's actions extended beyond the victims' families. They touched the very fabric of Anand itself. For the officers who investigated the case, the memories of long nights spent analyzing evidence and confronting the chilling confession of ZW remained vivid. The burden of those lost lives weighed heavily on their shoulders, adding to the city's collective grief. In the years following the trial, Joe's name became a stark symbol of the potential for evil lurking beneath an ordinary exterior. His troubled past, including his difficult childhood and time spent incarcerated, became subjects of discussion among criminologists and the community alike, serving as a sobering reminder of the darker aspects of human nature. In the minds of both psychologists and the general public, many questioned how such a seemingly kind-hearted man could transform into a figure of horror. The gentle exterior of a taxi driver, concealing a dark and terrifying reality, baffled many. His case became a pivotal example in criminology textbooks, illustrating the importance of understanding criminal psychological profiles and emphasizing the need for vigilance in every community. Despite his execution, Jones' legacy persisted as the residents of Anand continued to rebuild their lives. His crimes left a deep scar in the city's history, serving as a stark reminder of the dangers lurking beneath ordinary appearances. For years afterward, the fear that gripped the city during the summer of 2003 would resurface during moments of uncertainty. Rumors of the so-called taxi devil would still circulate through the streets, especially at night. Parents would caution their children to avoid traveling alone in taxis, urging them to stay in groups or opt for public transportation instead. In a tragic way, Zen's crimes became woven into the collective memory of Anand, a haunting chapter that the city would never fully forget. Yet, amidst the darkness, the community's resilience shone through. Anand remembered the terror it had endured, but also the strength and unity that helped it recover. The city's people learned to cherish their loved ones more deeply, transforming each taxi ride into a reminder of the importance of vigilance and trust. Over time, the story of Zen evolved beyond that of a criminal. It became a testament to a community's ability to confront trauma, rebuild its sense of security, and honor the lives lost in the most brutal manner. While Anand gradually healed, the memory of the taxi devil and the 6 lives he had taken remained etched in the city's heart. It served as a haunting but vital reminder that safety is fragile, and that even the most ordinary faces can hide the darkest intentions. The story of Zen was no longer just about a killer. It was about a community learning to live with its scars, to move forward, and to never forget the tragic cost of neglecting vigilance. In January of 2004, a landmark legal case unfolded in the United States, shaping the future of tribal sovereignty and criminal jurisdiction. The case of United States versus Lara became a defining moment in the ongoing tension between federal and tribal authorities. Billy Joe Lara, a member of the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe, found himself at the center of a legal dispute after being charged with assaulting a federal officer on the Spirit Lake Indian Reservation in North Dakota. Like many reservations, Spirit Lake operates under both tribal and federal legal systems, creating complex jurisdictional issues. Before federal charges were filed, Lara had already been prosecuted by the tribe for the same incident and had pleaded guilty. However, he later challenged the federal prosecution, arguing that it violated the double jeopardy clause of the Fifth Amendment, which prohibits trying someone twice for the same offense. This case highlighted the delicate balance of authority between tribal courts and federal courts, raising questions about sovereignty, legal jurisdiction, and the rights of indigenous communities within the broader American legal framework. In the case of Lara, the defense argued that the federal government should not have prosecuted him again for the same offense because the tribe had already addressed the matter. The core issue centered on a legal principle known as the dual sovereignty doctrine, which allows different sovereign entities, such as federal and tribal governments, to prosecute an individual for the same act without violating constitutional protections against double jeopardy. The key question before the Supreme Court was whether this doctrine permitted the federal government to pursue charges after the tribe had already taken legal action. In a narrow 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court upheld the federal prosecution, ruling that it did not breach the double jeopardy clause. Justice Stephen Breyer, writing for the majority, explained that the United States and the Spirit Lake Sioux tribe are separate sovereigns, each with the authority to prosecute. Because tribal sovereignty, recognized by Congress, grants tribes jurisdiction over crimes committed within their territories, even if federal law could also apply, the tribe's authority remained valid. This ruling was significant because it reaffirmed tribal sovereignty and clarified the legal relationship between federal and tribal systems. It established that tribes could prosecute non-members like Lara for crimes occurring on their land. Additionally, it reinforced the dual sovereignty doctrine, which permits multiple prosecutions by different sovereigns for the same act without violating constitutional protections. While supporters viewed the decision as strengthening tribal governance, critics expressed concern. They feared it could lead to increased prosecutions of Native Americans under both tribal and federal laws, possibly resulting in harsher punishments and inconsistent sentencing. There were also worries about the fairness of tribal trials, which might differ from federal court standards, raising questions about the protection of defendants' rights. Following the ruling in United States v. Lara, the case became a pivotal point in discussions about the balance of power between federal and tribal authorities. It reinforced the dual sovereignty doctrine, but also highlighted ongoing tensions and complexities in tribal-federal relations. This decision marked a significant milestone in Native American legal history, influencing future cases involving tribal authority and jurisdiction. The United States v. Lara case had profound implications for Native American rights and the broader balance of power among sovereign entities within the country. While the Supreme Court reaffirmed that tribal governments possess the authority to prosecute non-member Indians within their territories, it also sparked a wider debate about how this jurisdictional reality affects those advocating for stronger tribal sovereignty. To many supporters, the ruling was a victory, signaling that tribes are not merely remnants of history, but active, self-governing entities with legitimate legal authority. It clarified that tribes, in cooperation with the federal government, can independently handle criminal cases without infringing on each other's jurisdiction, thereby reinforcing their role in maintaining law and order within their communities. This decision underscored that tribal nations are not subordinate to federal authority, but are co-sovereign entities with their own distinct legal systems. However, reactions among Native Americans, especially those living on reservations, were mixed. Concerns arose about the potential erosion of their civil rights under a dual legal system that might not always operate fairly. Many feared that increased prosecutions at both tribal and federal levels could lead to inconsistent rulings or harsher sentences. Tribal courts, often less formal and with varying levels of legal expertise compared to federal courts, raised worries about the fairness of proceedings. Some individuals believed they might be more vulnerable under a system perceived as unequal, where procedural protections like the right to a jury trial could be lacking. Additionally, fears persisted that tribal governments, typically smaller and more isolated, could be influenced by political pressures, risking biased or arbitrary decisions. These issues prompted fundamental questions about the fairness and equality of legal treatment for Native Americans and the broader implications of diverging judicial standards. A key outcome of the case was a renewed focus on the historical and legal status of Native tribes, especially regarding their treatment by federal and state authorities. The ruling compelled many to re-examine the origins of tribal sovereignty and the complex relationship between indigenous nations and the broader legal framework of the United States. Tribal sovereignty, rooted in treaties with the United States, grants Native nations certain rights, including self-governance and the administration of justice. However, many indigenous leaders argue that the legal understanding of tribal sovereignty has not evolved adequately to reflect contemporary realities, often being challenged or diminished by federal authorities in pursuit of their own interests. In response, legal scholars and advocates have called for reforms to elevate tribal justice systems to meet federal standards, especially in criminal law, emphasizing the importance of procedural fairness and sufficient resources to ensure just trials. A key concern remains whether Native communities can rely on their own judicial institutions or if they face a two-tiered system that risks unfair treatment. This debate has intensified discussions about the rights of indigenous peoples and their ability to maintain autonomous legal processes. Meanwhile, the federal government and its agencies have responded to the landmark ruling by reaffirming their authority over crimes committed on tribal lands. The Department of Justice emphasized that federal jurisdiction persists even when tribal authorities have already taken action, enabling prosecutors to pursue cases involving violations of federal law, ranging from violence and drug trafficking to other serious offenses on reservations. Balancing respect for tribal sovereignty with the need for consistent law enforcement remains complex. Jurisdictional overlaps among agencies like the FBI and the Bureau of Indian Affairs often create confusion, as they must coordinate with tribal courts that may operate under their own legal codes. Such overlapping authority can complicate the justice process, affecting everyone from law enforcement officers to those accused of crimes. Following the United States versus Lara decision, Native nations began to actively strengthen their judicial systems. Efforts focused on reforming tribal court procedures, enhancing legal training, and expanding access to legal resources. Simultaneously, there was a push for the federal government to collaborate with tribes in ways that respect their sovereignty, while improving the effectiveness of tribal justice. Although the case was viewed as a victory for federal jurisdiction, it also highlighted the ongoing complexities in the relationship between Native tribes and the broader legal system, underscoring the need for a balanced approach that honors tribal self-determination. The Lara decision reinforced the vital role of tribal nations in managing their own affairs, emphasizing their sovereignty within the broader legal framework. However, it also highlighted the persistent tension between federal authority and tribal independence, a dynamic that would continue to develop over time. This ruling marked a pivotal moment in Native American legal history, exposing the complex legal challenges that influence the evolving relationships among indigenous communities, the federal government, and the U.S. legal system. In the years following the case, its social and legal repercussions rippled across the nation, especially within Native American populations. While the ruling underscored the importance of tribal sovereignty, it also ignited deeper debates about balancing justice, fairness, and the realities of dual jurisdiction. As federal and tribal authorities navigated overlapping legal domains, it became evident that managing these relationships required careful attention to the rights of individuals caught within multiple systems. For many Native Americans, the case served as a reminder of the ongoing power struggle between their communities and the federal government. It brought into focus the unique position of tribal nations, recognized as sovereign entities capable of self-governance, yet still subject to overarching federal laws. This duality often placed tribes in a delicate situation where their sovereignty, intended to empower them, could be compromised by federal interests that did not always align with their community needs. Beyond legal implications, the decision sparked broader conversations about the treatment of Native American communities. Many felt their rights had been persistently overlooked, both by federal authorities and the wider public, who often misunderstood or misrepresented tribal governance. Calls grew louder for increased recognition of indigenous traditions, especially in justice matters, along with reforms to ensure tribal members could actively participate in and benefit from the legal system. Advocates emphasized the need for stronger representation in legal proceedings and better access to resources, aiming to bolster tribal judicial systems and meet their communities' specific needs. Despite numerous obstacles rooted in a history of marginalization, a resilient spirit persisted within many tribal groups. The Lara ruling was widely seen as a necessary step toward a more just and equitable future, reaffirming tribes' right to self-governance and fostering hope for continued progress. The case of United States versus Lara highlighted the ongoing struggle of Native American tribes to assert their sovereignty within the U.S. legal system. It served as a powerful reminder that, despite federal oversight, tribes continue to fight for recognition of their rights and self-governance. This legal challenge prompted the entire judicial community, lawyers, judges, and lawmakers, to reconsider how existing laws could be adapted to better respect tribal legal traditions while still aligning with federal statutes. As a result, efforts increased to strengthen cooperation between federal authorities and Native nations, emphasizing mutual respect for tribal sovereignty. Beyond the courtroom, the case ignited a broader national conversation about the justice system's treatment of indigenous peoples. Scholars, activists, and the general public became more aware of issues surrounding racial inequality and the rights of marginalized communities. The case raised important questions about fairness and how the United States can fulfill its promises of equality for all citizens, regardless of background or heritage. In the years following the ruling, Native nations began actively pursuing reforms within their own judicial systems, advocating for updated laws and policies that address their communities' current needs. The federal government responded by providing resources and support to help tribes implement these changes. The significance of Lara extended beyond a single court decision. It became a catalyst for ongoing dialogue about how the nation can better honor tribal rights while ensuring constitutional protections are upheld. This case also contributed to raising awareness about Native American issues, encouraging discussions about history, power, and indigenous rights. It highlighted the often overlooked challenges faced by Native communities, especially when navigating complex legal and political structures that have historically marginalized them. Consequently, many tribal leaders took a more active role in shaping future legal frameworks, aiming to secure their communities' rights and ensure their voices are heard within the justice system. While United States versus Lara did not resolve all the difficulties faced by Native American populations, it sparked essential conversations about sovereignty, justice, and fairness. It marked a step toward recognizing the importance of respecting tribal self-determination and fostering a more equitable legal landscape for indigenous peoples. The complexities of the American legal system, particularly regarding indigenous peoples, highlight the urgent need for ongoing reforms and a more inclusive approach to justice. The landmark case involving Native American tribes remains a pivotal moment in the evolution of tribal sovereignty, serving as a reminder of both the progress achieved and the challenges that still lie ahead in the quest for equality, justice, and self-determination. Over the years, the legacy of the Lara decision has continued to influence how tribal sovereignty is recognized and respected, not only by the federal government but also by the tribes themselves. This case reflects the struggles that have long defined Native American experiences in the United States and acts as a call to action for a future where indigenous rights are integral to the nation's legal and social framework. In a different part of the world, Japan faced a tragic and unsettling event in January of 2004, which left a deep imprint on its society and judicial system. The murder of a 21-year-old student named Misato Harata in the village of Miho, Tachai Prefecture, garnered national attention and shocked the community. Harata was a dedicated and promising individual who disappeared on January 10th, an act entirely out of character for her. Her family and friends immediately grew concerned, and as days passed without any word, their anxiety intensified. Her body was eventually found in a river near Miho, revealing a brutal crime. She had been raped and murdered, suffering multiple stab wounds and signs of strangulation. The horrifying details of her death left the local population in disbelief, struggling to comprehend how such violence could occur in their peaceful village. Authorities launched a thorough investigation, canvassing the area for witnesses and collecting forensic evidence with great care. Despite their efforts, the case remained unresolved for several years, fueling public frustration and anxiety within Tachai Prefecture. The community felt unsettled by the lack of closure, and the loss of Harata's young life weighed heavily on everyone. It was not until nearly 14 years later, in 2018, that a breakthrough finally emerged. Advances in DNA analysis linked the crime to a Filipino national named Pinkun and Chua, who had been living in Japan at the time of the murder but had fled the country shortly afterward. When authorities discovered he had likely returned to the Philippines, they issued an international arrest warrant. The case took a significant turn when Ian was detained upon his return to Japan at Narita International Airport in Tokyo on the 24th of January in the year 2019. The arrest garnered widespread media attention, renewing hope for justice and closure in this long-standing case. The case of Ian, who was accused of the assault and killing of Misato Harata, drew widespread attention and became a highly publicized event in the country. The nation had long awaited justice, hoping that this trial would finally bring closure to a painful chapter. After a protracted legal process, the Tachi District Court found Pinkun and Chua guilty of the crime and sentenced him to life imprisonment. The court underscored the brutality involved and the deep emotional suffering inflicted on the victim's family and the community as a whole. This conviction was broadly celebrated as it marked the resolution of a case that had cast a shadow over Japan's legal history for many years. While justice was served for Misato's family, the pain of her loss remained. The case also shed light on several critical issues within Japan's criminal justice system. It revealed the substantial hurdles law enforcement faces when investigating crimes involving foreign nationals, and emphasized the importance of international cooperation in pursuing justice. Additionally, the case highlighted the vital role of forensic evidence, especially in solving cold cases, made more effective by technological advances that increased the accuracy and reliability of investigations. This incident had a significant impact on public discourse, especially concerning safety and the effectiveness of the justice system. It raised awareness about the complexities of handling cases that cross national borders and underscored the necessity of strong international networks to track and apprehend suspects. In the wake of the verdict, discussions continued about the efficiency of Japan's investigative methods and the need for ongoing improvements. The tragic death of Misato Harata remains a painful memory for her loved ones and the community of Miho. Although her murderer's conviction offered some sense of closure, it could not undo the loss. The case serves as a stark reminder of societal vulnerabilities and the ongoing struggle to achieve justice in a world often unpredictable and dangerous. As Japan reflects on the lessons learned, it becomes clear that addressing the complexities of criminal justice, particularly in protecting victims' rights and ensuring justice is ultimately served, remains a vital priority. The repercussions of Misato's death extended beyond the courtroom, highlighting challenges faced by law enforcement and the public, especially regarding jurisdiction and international cooperation. The fact that the suspect had fled the country shortly after the crime drew attention to the difficulties authorities encounter when suspects cross borders. This case underscored the importance of robust international partnerships and advanced investigative techniques to prevent and resolve such cases efficiently. The pursuit of justice in this case highlighted broader concerns about Japan's ability to resolve cold cases, especially those involving complex factors like foreign nationals. The breakthrough in 2018, made possible by advances in DNA analysis and forensic science, demonstrated how much investigative techniques had evolved. These technological strides allowed authorities to revisit long-standing cases with new tools capable of uncovering fresh insights. This progress became a focal point for law enforcement agencies both within Japan and internationally, as they explored ways to leverage modern technology to solve crimes once considered unsolvable. Despite this scientific progress, the years of uncertainty cast deep shadows over the victim's family and the community. The Hirata family endured prolonged anguish, clinging to hope that their daughter might return or that the case would eventually be resolved. As the investigation stretched on without definitive answers, their suffering was compounded by feelings of helplessness that often accompany unresolved tragedies. When the perpetrator was finally identified, it brought some relief, yet could not fully erase the profound grief and sense of loss experienced by Mato's loved ones. This case also prompted important discussions about the safety of young women in Japan. The brutality of the crime shocked the nation, raising awareness of vulnerabilities even in one of the world's safest countries. Many individuals, especially women, began questioning whether sufficient measures were in place to ensure personal security. Concerns grew particularly in rural areas where lower crime rates and close-knit communities might foster a false sense of security. The fact that the suspect had managed to escape abroad for years heightened public anxiety about law enforcement's ability to quickly apprehend offenders. For the wider society, this tragedy served as a stark reminder that Japan's reputation for safety does not mean complete immunity from violence. The incident prompted citizens to reflect on how crime, especially violent acts, could impact anyone, anywhere, at any time. As details of the investigation emerged, the public was confronted with the uncomfortable truth that even in a country with strict laws and high safety standards, tragic events could still occur. The aftermath also sparked increased scrutiny of Japan's criminal justice system, particularly regarding its treatment of foreign nationals. The suspect's status as a fugitive underscored ongoing concerns about the effectiveness of law enforcement in tracking down and apprehending individuals who cross borders to evade justice. This case became a catalyst for broader discussions about the need for systemic improvements to ensure that safety and justice are upheld for all residents, regardless of nationality. The highlighted case revealed the intricate nature of extradition laws and the difficulties in enforcing justice across borders. Japan, working alongside international authorities, faced the challenge of closing cooperation gaps to track down suspects and ensure they face trial. Despite having a relatively effective system of legal collaboration, the incident underscored the urgent need for stronger international partnerships, especially when suspects fled the country. In the years following Keith Ginn and Eanes' conviction, debates about the treatment of foreign nationals within Japan's legal framework gained prominence. The case became a catalyst for discussions on the rights and protections afforded to foreigners living in Japan, emphasizing the importance of balancing fair treatment with national security. Human rights groups and legal experts pushed for reforms aimed at ensuring justice for all, regardless of nationality, while safeguarding the safety of Japanese citizens. At the same time, the case spotlighted the growing role of technology in criminal investigations. The use of DNA analysis and forensic science in Eanes' case marked a significant breakthrough, showcasing how technological advances could solve crimes once considered unsolvable. DNA profiling proved crucial in linking Eanes to the crime scene and securing his conviction, highlighting the transformative impact of forensic innovations on law enforcement. This technological progress sparked broader discussions about how Japan could further develop its forensic capabilities to maintain high standards of accuracy and efficiency in future investigations. The lessons learned from the Hirata case underscored the importance of continuous investment in advanced forensic tools and the need for greater international cooperation and transparency within the legal system. Such measures are vital to ensure justice, regardless of a suspect's nationality or where they may attempt to escape. While the Hirata family could never fully recover from their loss, the conviction provided a measure of closure, allowing them to begin the long process of healing. The tragedy became a catalyst for change, prompting vital conversations about safety, justice, and the role of technology in shaping the future of criminal investigations. It compelled Japan to confront its vulnerabilities and reassess how to better protect its citizens and uphold justice across borders. In an increasingly interconnected and complex world, the lessons drawn from this case would resonate for many years, reminding the nation that justice is often a slow process. Yet, with perseverance, dedication, and the aid of modern technology, even the most challenging cases can eventually reach resolution. The conviction of Keith Gian for Misato Harata's murder demonstrated that the impact of such crimes extends far beyond the immediate family, leaving a lasting mark on the collective consciousness of Japan. This tragic event shook the nation's sense of security, prompting widespread reflection on justice, safety, and the evolving relationship between society and crime. For Harata's family, the trial and subsequent verdict provided a bittersweet sense of closure. While they had waited years for justice, no legal outcome could undo the profound loss of their daughter and sister. Nevertheless, they chose to honor her memory by advocating for better protections for women and emphasizing that justice, no matter how long delayed, remains essential. Their efforts to raise awareness about the emotional toll of violent crimes and their long-term effects helped foster a broader understanding of the importance of victim support and societal safety. The case also sparked discussions about Japan's justice system, especially regarding its handling of foreign suspects. The conviction of Guyan raised significant questions about the country's extradition laws and international cooperation, particularly since the suspect had fled abroad. Despite Japan's strong diplomatic ties with nations like the Philippines, the case revealed gaps in the efficiency of tracking and returning international suspects. This prompted policymakers to consider revising protocols to prevent similar delays in future investigations. Furthermore, the case underscored the vital role of forensic science in modern criminal investigations. The breakthrough in 2018, when DNA evidence linked Guyan to the crime, exemplified how technological advancements could solve cold cases long thought unsolvable. This development demonstrated the remarkable progress of forensic techniques, highlighting that even long-standing mysteries could be unraveled with cutting-edge methods. DNA profiling proved crucial in securing the conviction, emphasizing the importance of continued investment in forensic technology and encouraging law enforcement to develop new tools for future cases. Overall, the case of Misato Harata became a testament to the power of modern science and persistent pursuit of justice, inspiring ongoing efforts to improve legal processes and protect victims across the nation. Focusing on technological advancements spurred broader debates about Japan's criminal justice reforms. Legal experts and advocates emphasized the need for changes that would enable the country to more effectively handle complex cases, particularly those involving foreign nationals. Despite Japan's historically low crime rates compared to other nations, the Harata case revealed that even in a society renowned for safety, tragedies could still occur. This incident prompted calls for improved training for law enforcement in managing international cases and for stronger cooperation with foreign governments to ensure justice, regardless of the perpetrator's background or location. Following the trial, public awareness about personal safety significantly increased. The brutal nature of Mato's murder, combined with the fact that the suspect had evaded capture for an extended period, raised doubts about the effectiveness of Japan's safety infrastructure. While the country's crime rates remained low, such events served as a reminder that no society is entirely immune to violence. Many, especially women, became more vigilant, taking extra precautions when traveling alone or in unfamiliar areas. This heightened awareness was particularly noticeable in rural communities like Miho, where residents had previously felt more secure and less alert to potential threats. The case ignited nationwide discussions on how to better protect vulnerable populations and address potential gaps in community safety. Calls grew for increased patrols, enhanced surveillance systems, and community outreach programs aimed at raising awareness about personal security. Some experts also advocated for expanded public education on self-defense and safety techniques, believing that a more informed populace could better prevent similar incidents. Moreover, the trial resonated with those pushing for reform within Japan's criminal justice system. It underscored the importance of swift, transparent justice and the need for ongoing legal improvements to keep pace with evolving criminal methods. Professionals working on cold cases began reevaluating their investigative strategies, advocating for more proactive approaches to solving unresolved crimes. The case reinforced the idea that the legal system must be adaptable and forward-thinking to ensure justice is consistently served. As Japan gradually recovered from the emotional and legal repercussions of the tragedy, society recognized the vital importance of holding individuals accountable, regardless of nationality or circumstances. Although Mato Harata's death was a tragic and senseless loss, it ultimately propelled the nation toward essential reforms in its justice system and crime prevention strategies. The media coverage, her family's advocacy, and the public discourse surrounding her case contributed to a broader societal reflection on safety, justice, and the need for continuous improvement. In the wake of resolving Misato Harata's murder, the way law enforcement approached cold cases and the public's perception of personal safety underwent significant change. While her family and community found some solace in the case's closure, its ripple effects would continue to influence Japan for many years. The nation was confronted with an unsettling truth. Violent incidents could occur anywhere, even in a society renowned for its safety. This case served as a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities present in every community, emphasizing the importance of ongoing vigilance, cooperation, and reforms within the legal and security systems. Although Misato's death was tragic and the pursuit of justice arduous for her loved ones, the lessons learned, particularly regarding international cooperation, technological advancements, and investigative methods, would shape Japan's approach to crime prevention and justice for years to come. In January of 2004, Japan faced a shocking crime that would become one of its most notorious cases, both for its brutality and the high-profile legal proceedings that followed. The incident involved the murder of a prominent businessman, Yukio Kuroda, whose body was discovered under mysterious circumstances on the 18th of that month in his luxurious Tokyo residence in the Minato district. The case gained notoriety not only because of its gruesome nature, but also due to the complex web of deception, betrayal, and intrigue surrounding it. Kuroda, a successful CEO of a multinational corporation, was well known in Tokyo's business circles, having accumulated considerable wealth and influence. On the surface, he appeared to lead an ideal life, devoted family, thriving career, and a beautiful home. Yet beneath this facade, his life was far more complicated. Friends and colleagues had observed subtle tensions between Kuroda and his family, especially his wife Aruko, whom he had married 15 years earlier. Rumors circulated about his infidelity and financial issues within his company, which he had been desperately trying to conceal. No one anticipated the shocking events that would unfold on that winter night. On the evening of January 18th, Kuroda was found dead by his housekeeper, who had arrived early the next morning to start her duties. Horrified by the scene, she immediately contacted authorities. His body was discovered in his study, slumped over his desk with a gunshot wound to the back of his head. Investigators noted the absence of forced entry, leading them to suspect that the murderer was someone close to Kuroda, someone with access to his home. The initial police investigation was thorough, with officers meticulously examining the residence and searching for clues that could reveal the identity of the perpetrator. Initially, investigators suspected that any clue pointing toward a suspect might be linked to Kuroda's associations. It soon emerged that he belonged to an exclusive circle of businessmen, many of whom had engaged in various financial dealings that raised questions. His colleagues in the business community, increasingly concerned about his unpredictable behavior in the weeks before his death, became key witnesses. Early in the investigation, Kota's wife, Hiro, was questioned. She had a solid alibi, having been at a social event with friends the night prior. Despite this, her relationship with Kota was closely examined. Friends and acquaintances described their marriage as strained, with rumors suggesting Hiro had discovered Kota's infidelity just months earlier. As the investigation progressed, attention shifted to Kuroda's business activities. Detectives uncovered evidence of embezzlement within his company, revealing that he had been siphoning off funds for several years. This new revelation added layers of complexity. Was the motive personal betrayal, financial hardship, or something more sinister? Could someone from his business circle, a competitor or disgruntled employee, have taken drastic action? The police worked tirelessly to gather further evidence, but the case seemed to be heading in multiple directions. Just when it appeared the investigation had stalled, a breakthrough occurred. A security camera in a nearby building captured footage of a figure leaving Kuroda's residence on the night of the incident. Although the footage was grainy, authorities identified a vehicle parked outside and a partial license plate. Cross-referencing this information led to the discovery that the vehicle was registered to D. Yoshida, a former business partner of Kuroda who had fallen out with him years earlier. Yoshida, now a disgraced entrepreneur, had a known history of violent outbursts and was rumored to harbor resentment over a business idea he believed Kuroda had stolen. The identification of Yoshida's involvement marked a turning point. Authorities quickly located and detained him for questioning. Initially, Yoshida denied any connection to the incident, claiming he had not been near Kuroda's house that night. However, once confronted with the security footage and other evidence, his story began to fall apart. After hours of intense interrogation, Yoshida finally confessed. He revealed that he had been driven by rage over Kuroda's betrayal and had meticulously planned the act over several months. Yoshida admitted that he had once collaborated with Kuroda on a business venture, but after initial success, Kuroda had cut him out and taken full control. Left with nothing, Yoshida's resentment had festered into a desire for revenge. Yoshida had uncovered Kuroda's financial struggles and exploited this knowledge to his advantage. He capitalized on Kuroda's preoccupation with the company's declining profits, using the distraction to secretly plan his revenge. On the night of the incident, Yoshida entered Kuroda's residence through a rear door he knew would be left unlocked. He waited until Kuroda was alone in his study before confronting him. In a surge of anger, Yoshida shot Kuroda in the back of the head, carefully staging the scene to resemble a robbery gone wrong. After committing the act, he meticulously arranged the surroundings and left, knowing that the absence of forced entry would lead investigators to someone close to the victim. The confession sent shockwaves through the business community. The public was stunned by the details of the murder and the extent of Yoshida's premeditation. Many questioned how someone could harbor such deep-seated resentment over the years and how business relationships could deteriorate into deadly rivalries. The case also raised unsettling questions about how far individuals might go driven by jealousy, greed, or pride. Once a promising entrepreneur, Yoshida became a symbol of the dangers posed by unchecked ambition and the darker aspects of human nature. Later that year, Yoshida's trial drew widespread media attention, with reporters and spectators eager to learn the case's details. Throughout the proceedings, Yoshida maintained his confession, but showed little remorse. Ultimately, he was convicted of murder and sentenced to life imprisonment. His conviction brought a mixture of relief and sorrow, relief that justice was achieved, yet sadness over the tragic loss of life. The murder of Kuroda left a profound impact on Tokyo and Japan as a whole, serving as a stark reminder of how business rivalries can escalate into violence and how the pressures of success can drive individuals to irrational acts. The case left a lasting scar on the business community, and Kuroda's name became synonymous with the perils of greed and betrayal. Over time, public interest waned, but the memory of that cold January night in 2004 remained vivid for those affected. For Yoshida, the once promising businessman, the burden of his actions would haunt him indefinitely. For Kuroda's family and friends, the loss was an unhealable wound. These tragic events became part of Japan's dark criminal history, a cautionary tale about the high cost of betrayal and the destructive power of unchecked hatred. As investigations deepened, authorities uncovered the complex and strained relationship between Kuroda and Yoshida. It became evident that their previous business partnership had been far from amicable, and that Yoshida harbored intense resentment over how their relationship had ended. Two men once collaborated on a promising venture within the tech industry, pooling their skills and resources to establish a new company. Over time, however, their partnership deteriorated. Kuroda, with his keen business sense, gradually took full control, leaving Yoshida feeling betrayed and pushed aside. This shift deepened Yoshida's sense of frustration, especially as Kuroda secured a significantly larger share of the profits, while Yoshida's financial situation worsened. Although Yoshida never openly expressed his discontent, those close to him noticed a growing bitterness and resentment. He often spoke bitterly about how Kuroda had stolen his ideas and potential, leaving him with nothing. Despite his grievances, Yoshida maintained a professional exterior, continuing to run his small business, yet it was evident that his financial and emotional struggles weighed heavily on him. In the months before the tragedy, those around him observed signs of increasing paranoia and irritability. No one suspected that his mounting bitterness might escalate into violence. Initially, police had little evidence to work with. The absence of physical clues at the scene and the lack of signs of forced entry led investigators to believe the perpetrator might have been someone familiar to the victim. They began questioning Kuroda's family, friends, and colleagues, but no link to Yoshida emerged. Most people who knew Kuroda were shocked by the incident, finding it difficult to understand why anyone would want to harm him, given his popularity and lack of known enemies. The only clues were security footage capturing a figure near the house on the night of the incident and a faint license plate number from a vehicle parked outside. Following this lead, authorities traced the vehicle to a rental agency. The registration details initially proved unhelpful, but further investigation revealed a connection to Yoshida. The car had been rented under a false name, yet an address and phone number linked to Yoshida surfaced through multiple transactions at the same agency. Recognizing the significance of this link, detectives remained cautious, unwilling to accuse without concrete evidence. When they finally located Yoshida, he was living in a modest apartment on Tokyo's outskirts. His demeanor was unusually composed, almost too calm, and he appeared surprisingly prepared for questioning. Yoshida initially denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he hadn't seen Kuroda in years. However, investigators were relentless, presenting him with compelling evidence, including security footage and details about the rental car. At first, Yoshida maintained that the car had been rented by someone else and insisted he had no idea how it ended up near Kuroda's residence. Yet, the police remained unconvinced, pressing him further and showing the incriminating evidence, demanding an explanation for his whereabouts on the night of the incident. As the weight of the evidence bore down, Yoshida's composure began to unravel. His body language shifted and he became increasingly defensive. His story grew more inconsistent with each interrogation. After hours of questioning, Yoshida finally confessed that he had been at Kuroda's house that night. Although he initially downplayed his role, he revealed that he had gone there to confront Kuroda about a failed business deal from years earlier. He insisted he had no intention of causing harm. According to Yoshida, their confrontation started as a heated dispute over past grievances, with Kuroda accusing him of jealousy and resentment. He admitted that things escalated quickly when he entered Kuroda's study armed with a gun, which he had obtained from a friend. He claimed that Kuroda's hostile and dismissive attitude caused him to lose control, leading him to shoot him in the back of the head in a moment of uncontrollable rage. Yoshida then described how he went to great lengths to cover up the crime, attempting to make it appear as a robbery gone wrong. He took some valuables, including Kuroda's wallet, from the house to stage the scene. However, he had underestimated the thoroughness of the police investigation. The evidence he left behind ultimately led to his downfall. His confession revealed not only the brutality of the act, but also the premeditation involved. Yoshida had carefully planned the murder, choosing the right moment to confront Kuroda and orchestrating every step, from renting the car to entering through a back door, aiming to exact revenge for perceived wrongs. His meticulous preparation reflected the depth of his resentment and bitterness, culminating in a tragic act driven by long-standing grudges. Following his arrest, the case garnered intense media attention, captivating the public with details of the crime. Many were shocked that a former business associate could commit such a violent act over a failed deal. The incident also prompted uncomfortable reflections on the nature of success and failure within Japan's highly competitive society, raising questions about how personal grievances can escalate into devastating actions. In the competitive landscape of modern business, where the drive to succeed is relentless and the repercussions of perceived betrayal can be devastating, the story of a tragic incident in Japan drew widespread attention. Media outlets depicted a man overwhelmed by anger and pride whose personal grudges ultimately led to his downfall. This case sparked broader conversations about the psychological toll that intense corporate rivalries and personal conflicts can impose on individuals, especially in high-pressure environments like Japan's corporate world. Experts highlighted the increasing prevalence of mental health issues related to workplace stress, emphasizing how societal expectations and the need to project success might push some to act destructively. Despite the shocking nature of the crime, authorities swiftly assembled a case against Yoshida, whose trial commenced later that year. Prosecutors claimed that Yoshida had meticulously planned and carried out the murder as an act of revenge for perceived injustices inflicted by Kuroda. Conversely, the defense argued that Yoshida's actions stemmed from a momentary lapse driven by years of emotional and financial strain, suggesting that his mental state at the time should be carefully considered. Over several months, witnesses testified about the complex relationship between Yoshida and Kuroda, as well as the mounting pressures that had accumulated over the years. In the end, the court convicted Yoshida of first-degree murder, sentencing him to life imprisonment. While the verdict provided a sense of closure, the loss of Kuroda remained a heavy burden for those who followed the case. The murder marked a turning point in how personal disputes and corporate rivalries are perceived in Japan, serving as a stark reminder of the destructive potential when emotions override reason. For Yoshida, the repercussions of his actions would shadow him for the rest of his days, and for Kuroda's family, the pain of losing a loved one in such a brutal manner was irremediable. The incident left a lasting imprint on Japan's history, illustrating the tragic consequences of anger, betrayal, and revenge. As years passed, the shock of Kuroda's death continued to resonate across the nation. The case not only captured public attention, but also ignited discussions about the darker currents of ambition, jealousy, and personal conflict within the corporate sphere. Yoshida's story, once a promising career, became a cautionary tale about the dangers lurking in Japan's fiercely competitive business environment. For Kuroda's family, the trauma of losing their loved one in such a senseless act remained an unhealed wound, with Haruko, his wife, silently grappling with her grief, even as she was aware of the underlying tensions that had existed in their marriage. In the months following the tragic event, she found herself unprepared for the profound changes that had reshaped their lives. After the incident, he kept a low profile, refusing media interviews and withdrawing from public view. Despite their difficulties, she had loved her husband deeply, and his sudden violent passing left her overwhelmed with disbelief and intense sorrow. Although she had sensed some emotional distance between them, nothing could have prepared her for the shocking truths about his past, his hidden business dealings, extramarital affairs, and the betrayals that ultimately contributed to his demise. The years that followed became a quiet period of reflection, during which she grappled with their shared history and the realization that she would have to carry the burden of his absence and the dark secrets that had surrounded him. Their children, too, were deeply affected. The murder shattered their naive perception of their father as a successful and stable man. The media's portrayal of his death revealed a man entangled in personal and professional struggles that they had never known. Public attention quickly shifted from shock to a relentless search for details about his private life, his business affairs, and his relationships. The children faced the painful duality of loving their father while confronting the complex, troubled figure he had become, driven by ambition and pride. Healing from such a traumatic loss was a slow and intricate process, as they navigated their grief alongside the unsettling truths about his past. Meanwhile, Yoshida's life after the trial settled into quiet confinement. His once promising career as an entrepreneur had been shattered, and after being sentenced to life imprisonment, he was sent to a maximum security facility where he would spend his remaining days. In prison, Yoshida became a solitary figure, seldom interacting with others. His mental health, which had already declined in the years leading up to the incident, worsened in the isolation of incarceration. Although he had expressed remorse during the trial, over time it became clear that his regret was complex, tinged with bitterness over lost potential. He often spoke of betrayal, yet in conversations with prison counselors, he also acknowledged the destructive power of his own rage and the obsession with revenge that had consumed him. His trial had been a media spectacle, but his life behind bars was marked by quiet reflection and occasional torment. Reports indicated that Yoshida had attempted to participate in educational and rehabilitative programs, but his efforts were often met with skepticism from staff and fellow inmates alike. The shadow of his involvement in the tragedy continued to cast a pall over his existence, shaping his days in confinement. The case stood as a somber reminder of the devastating effects that unchecked jealousy and ambition can have on individuals and their lives. It was reported that he occasionally discussed with fellow inmates how he believed that taking another person's life might somehow restore justice to the perceived wrongs he had endured. Over time, however, he came to realize that his actions had not only ended a man's life, but also destroyed his own future. Once filled with potential, his life had unraveled in a tragic and irreversible manner. This incident continued to echo within legal and corporate circles, often cited in discussions about workplace rivalry, mental health, and the extreme measures individuals might consider when consumed by personal grievances. The case was frequently referenced in seminars aimed at addressing the toxic culture of competitive environments and promoting healthier corporate practices. Experts in business ethics and workplace behavior used it as a stark example of what can happen when personal conflicts escalate unchecked, illustrating how ambition and rivalry can blur the boundaries between professional conduct and criminal acts. The legal community also kept the case in focus, though Yoshida's conviction was clear. Debates persisted regarding the influence of mental health on his actions. It was known that Yoshida had been battling depression and anxiety in the months before the incident, leading some to argue that these issues may have contributed to impulsive behavior. Legal analysts discussed whether the court should have considered a reduced sentence based on his mental state, but ultimately, his actions were deemed deliberate and planned. The case sparked wider conversations about the importance of mental health support within corporate environments, questioning whether those in high-pressure roles received adequate resources to manage their personal and professional struggles. For the public, it served as a chilling reminder of how fragile human relationships can be, especially amid intense competition. It underscored the dangers of harboring grudges and unresolved conflicts, as well as how unchecked emotions can lead to destructive outcomes. For those closely following the case, the image of Kuroda's tragic death remained vivid, symbolizing not only the loss of life, but also the erosion of trust and stability that once underpinned his family and career. The incident starkly revealed how easily success can turn into obsession, and how ambition can manifest in unpredictable and devastating ways. The events that led to Yusuke Kuroda's death would forever serve as a grim reminder of the destructive power of unchecked emotions and rivalries. The story of his tragic end would forever be etched into Japan's criminal history, serving as a stark reminder of how fragile human relationships can be and how destructive emotions like anger, jealousy, and pride can influence one's actions. For the Kuroda family, memories of their loved one would remain forever tinged with sorrow, while for Yoshida, the repercussions of his choices would shadow him throughout his life. This case exemplifies how thin the line can be between success and failure, right and wrong, illustrating that the consequences of our actions, whether driven by personal grief or rivalry, can endure far longer than anticipated. In January of 2004, a chilling crime captured the attention of South Korea's entire population. It all began on a cold evening when a quiet Seoul suburb was shaken by the discovery of a brutal murder. The victim was a 47-year-old woman named Uni Park, a respected school teacher who had dedicated over 20 years to her high school. Widely admired for her kindness and dedication, Uni was a beloved figure in her community. Her sudden death was completely out of character for the peaceful neighborhood, and the shock rippled through the city, spreading fear and confusion. Her body was found in her modest apartment, surrounded by signs of a fierce struggle. She had been stabbed multiple times, with the fatal wound piercing her chest. The apartment showed signs of forced entry, with the front door broken open, yet nothing appeared stolen. No valuables were missing. Police quickly recognized this was no random act of violence, but a targeted personal attack. Initially, investigators struggled to find leads, as Uni had no known enemies, and her personal life seemed as serene as her public image. She was unmarried, childless, and there were no reports of ongoing disputes or conflicts. The neighborhood was quiet, with no prior history of crime. As the investigation progressed, detectives delved into Uni's background, searching for clues that might lead to a suspect. The breakthrough came when they uncovered her involvement in an online relationship with a man named Sonho Kim. The two had connected through a popular social media platform that was gaining popularity in South Korea at the time. Sonho, a 32-year-old software engineer living elsewhere in the city, and Uni had bonded over shared interests in literature and philosophy. Their conversations grew increasingly intimate, with both exchanging personal details and discussing their dreams. Uni had even begun to confide in Sonho about her feelings, hinting at a deeper connection that might have played a role in the tragic events. A woman who had dedicated her life to teaching grappled with profound feelings of loneliness, especially as she faced the prospect of aging without a family of her own. The isolation of remaining unmarried weighed heavily on her, gradually taking a toll on her emotional well-being. Meanwhile, a man named Sonho was still searching for his place in the world. Despite holding a stable job, his social interactions were limited, and he too felt the burden of solitude. Their paths crossed through online conversations, offering each other a sense of companionship, even if only virtually. As their connection deepened, Sonho began to reveal a more obsessive and possessive side. Initially flattered by his attention, the woman, Unji, soon grew uncomfortable with his increasing insistence on meeting in person. Sonho started pressuring her to turn their online relationship into a physical one, sending increasingly desperate messages. Feeling conflicted, Unji gradually distanced herself from him. Yet, unable to accept her rejection, Sonho grew more frustrated and obsessive. In the days leading up to the tragic event, authorities uncovered that Sonho had become fixated on the idea of meeting Unji face to face. His thoughts had shifted from a virtual connection to a belief that they were destined to be together. His messages expressed feelings of betrayal, anguish, and confusion as he accused her of leading him on and playing with his emotions. On the night of the incident, Sonho had finally decided to meet Unji in person, claiming he wanted to resolve their issues through dialogue. Unji, feeling some responsibility for the emotional strain she had caused, reluctantly agreed. She invited him to her apartment, hoping to end their interaction peacefully and put an end to the unhealthy dynamic that had developed. However, Sonho's obsession had already crossed a dangerous boundary. When he arrived, what was meant to be a calm conversation quickly escalated into a heated confrontation. Overwhelmed by rage, Sonho suddenly grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her. Unji fought desperately to defend herself, but he was stronger and relentless. Ultimately, he stabbed her multiple times, leaving her to bleed out in her own home. After the attack, Sonho fled the scene, leaving behind a trail of blood. He immediately turned off his phone, attempting to vanish, fully aware that law enforcement would soon be searching for him. His obsession with Unji had driven him into darkness, and despite knowing the destructive path he was on, he was unable to control his actions driven by his intense feelings. Following the murder, Siho went into hiding, but his whereabouts did not remain concealed for long. Law enforcement swiftly tracked his movements, discovering that he had attempted to withdraw substantial sums from various ATMs across the city in an effort to cover his tracks. Despite his attempts to evade detection, authorities managed to piece together his financial activities and apprehended him within a week of the incident. His arrest sent shockwaves through the community, sparking widespread media coverage that highlighted the darker aspects of online relationships and the internet's hidden dangers. The case raised unsettling questions about how someone could be driven to violence over a connection that existed solely in the digital realm, emphasizing the risks of emotional manipulation and the profound psychological impact of obsession. Seho's trial was lengthy and emotionally charged. Throughout the proceedings, he expressed sincere remorse, yet his apologies were met with skepticism. His defense argued that his actions stemmed from intense emotional turmoil, fueled by loneliness and rejection, which had overwhelmed him. Conversely, the prosecution portrayed him as someone who had crossed a moral boundary, unable to accept rejection and resorting to violence. After hours of deliberation, the jury found Seho guilty of first-degree murder, resulting in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. The murder of Uni Park served as a tragic reminder of the potential dangers lurking within the digital landscape. It underscored the importance of caution when forming online connections and recognizing warning signs of obsessive behavior. Uni's death, though heartbreaking, prompted a national dialogue about the intersection of technology, human emotion, and violence. Her story, once filled with hope, became a somber warning about the perils of the internet age. As Seho Kim's trial unfolded, the case's complexity became even clearer. The courtroom was tense, filled with spectators and journalists eager to understand what had driven Seho to commit such a brutal act. Once perceived as a quiet, reserved individual, Seho had become a symbol of the dangers associated with online relationships. His actions raised profound questions about the links between technology, loneliness, and mental health. During the trial, his defense team argued that he had been under extreme emotional strain due to unrequited love and feelings of abandonment. They depicted him as a person suffering from deep psychological wounds, worsened by his inability to forge meaningful connections in the physical world. His growing obsession with Uni was presented as a tragic consequence of social isolation, highlighting the complex and often hidden vulnerabilities that can lead to devastating outcomes. A man who had clung desperately to his initial connection with someone saw it shattered before his eyes. His defense attorney described him as a victim of his own mental health struggles, asserting that his declining sense of self-worth had impaired his ability to control his actions. Throughout the trial, he remained quiet and withdrawn, often hiding behind shadows of guilt and remorse. Instead of denying his involvement, he expressed profound regret for what he had done, offering heartfelt apologies to the victim's family and expressing disbelief at how his emotions had overtaken him. The image of a once gentle and reserved individual now standing accused of such violence was difficult for many to accept. In contrast, the prosecution painted a starkly different picture. They depicted him as someone whose obsession had festered into something far darker than mere unreciprocated affection. They argued that he had deliberately ignored the victim's wishes, viewing her rejection not as a natural end to their online interaction, but as a personal insult he could not tolerate. They emphasized that despite his intense feelings, his actions were not impulsive but planned. His attempt to conceal the crime by withdrawing money and going into hiding highlighted his awareness of the gravity of his deeds. As the proceedings continued, it became clear that a sense of entitlement played a significant role in his violent outburst. His inability to accept that the victim did not want a physical relationship, combined with his emotional breakdown over her rejection, served as the catalyst for his rage. His obsession had clouded his judgment, leading him to believe he had the right to demand her affection regardless of her wishes. The prosecution argued that this mindset demonstrated the dangerous consequences of untreated emotional and psychological issues when left unchecked. The emotional toll of the trial was most deeply felt by the victim's family. Her parents, who had raised her to be kind and diligent, were devastated by her sudden and violent death. They had never imagined their daughter's life would end in such a tragic way. The months leading up to the trial were filled with grief and confusion as they struggled to come to terms with her loss. Despite her quiet and reserved nature, she was deeply caring, which made her tragic end all the more heartbreaking. Her family had hoped that the courtroom proceedings would bring some measure of closure, but reliving her final moments proved overwhelmingly painful, especially for her mother, who was torn apart by the emotional weight of the experience. The tragic loss of her daughter had always been a heavy burden for Uni's mother, who took pride in her child's career as a teacher and the positive influence she had on her students. She had envisioned a future where her daughter would enjoy a long, fulfilling life, perhaps even finding a partner to share it with. Yet, she could never have anticipated that her daughter's life would be taken by someone she had only encountered online. For her, it was unfathomable to reconcile the image of the caring, loving daughter she raised with the brutal end she met at the hands of a man she had never met in person. As details about Uni and Seho's online relationship emerged, media coverage intensified. The public learned how their connection had developed and how Seho's obsession had grown over time. This case sparked urgent discussions about the risks of internet-based relationships and how they can spiral beyond control when emotions become unbalanced. Experts in psychology and online behavior warned about the dangers of forming deep emotional bonds with strangers, especially when those feelings are not rooted in reality. The incident also prompted a broader societal conversation in South Korea about mental health and the importance of addressing emotional struggles before they escalate. Mental health professionals highlighted the pressures many face to establish relationships both online and offline, which can sometimes lead to unhealthy attachments. The case revealed how loneliness, rejection, and isolation, if left unaddressed, can manifest in dangerous ways. As the trial concluded, Seho's fate was decided after hours of deliberation. The jury found him guilty, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of Uni Park. The judge acknowledged that Seho's emotional distress was understandable, but emphasized that it did not justify his actions. He was held responsible for the violence and the profound psychological harm inflicted on the victim's family, friends, and community. The sentence served as a stark reminder of the destructive potential of unchecked obsession and underscored the importance of mental health awareness in preventing such tragedies. In the years that followed, the case of Uni Park remained a poignant cautionary tale about the dangers of online relationships and the impact of emotional neglect. Her tragic death became a catalyst for broader discussions on mental health, the influence of the internet on human interaction, and the necessity of maintaining healthy emotional boundaries. The trial underscored the critical need for awareness and intervention to protect individuals from the devastating consequences of emotional vulnerability left unaddressed. The verdict, while providing a sense of justice, offered little solace to Un Park's family and the wider community. Her parents were left with an overwhelming sense of loss that no legal decision could ever truly mend. Their daughter, whose life had been taken so violently, would never walk through their door again or return to the classroom where she had touched countless lives. The emptiness left by her absence was impossible to fill, forcing them to face a world without the woman they loved, her as a caring daughter, a dedicated teacher, and a cherished friend. Her family grappled with the painful realization that her tragic end stemmed from a relationship they had never known about, one that had been nurtured quietly online in the secluded corners of the internet. For the community, her case became a stark reminder of how seemingly harmless online interactions could turn into something dark and destructive. Many knew her as a warm, approachable educator who always went above and beyond for her students. Her loss shattered the illusion that their world was immune to such brutal acts, revealing how easily a life full of promise could be taken by someone whose identity remained hidden behind the anonymity of the internet. Following the trial, discussions about the dangers of online relationships became a common topic in the media. Public awareness campaigns aimed to educate especially young people about the potential risks of engaging with strangers online. Experts in psychology and digital behavior emphasized the importance of understanding the complex emotional factors behind such tragedies. They explained how the internet, while a powerful tool for connection, could also foster unhealthy obsessions, particularly when individuals struggle to manage their feelings or handle rejection in a constructive way. The sudden and violent loss of Park deeply affected her former students, many of whom found it difficult to comprehend how someone so kind and supportive could be taken from them in such a brutal manner. She had been a steady presence in their lives, offering not only academic guidance but emotional support as well. Her death served as a harsh reminder of life's fragility, prompting many students to seek counseling to process their grief. The school where she had taught for over 20 years was left to mourn the loss of a beloved teacher and mentor. In the weeks following her passing, a memorial service was held, bringing together colleagues and students to honor her memory. Despite ongoing discussions about online safety and emotional well-being, the broader implications of her tragic death proved difficult to address fully, leaving a lasting impact on the community. Many believed that society had grown increasingly disconnected from genuine human emotion, living in a world where relationships were often mediated by technology. As people spent more time online, they began to lose sight of the importance of face-to-face interactions, those subtle cues in body language and the tones in a person's voice that reveal emotional states or disconnection. Social media platforms had expanded opportunities for connection, but also fostered a false sense of intimacy, allowing individuals to express feelings through text without truly understanding how their words affected others. The tragedy involving Sonho Kim underscored the dangers of unchecked emotional vulnerability, especially in a society where mental health issues are often overlooked. South Korea, like many nations, has long struggled with the stigma surrounding mental illness, making individuals hesitant to seek help out of fear of social judgment or being perceived as weak. Sonho's inability to handle rejection and his subsequent violent outburst reflected a deeper problem: the difficulty many face in confronting and expressing emotions healthily. His obsessive attachment to Uni was an extreme result of untreated mental health struggles, illustrating how neglecting emotional well-being can lead to devastating consequences. The events that culminated in Uni's loss raised critical questions about how society might better support those facing emotional difficulties. Could earlier intervention have helped Sonho manage his feelings more constructively? Could more be done to prevent such tragedies? These questions lingered long after the trial, prompting mental health advocates to call for increased awareness and resources, especially in the digital age. They emphasized the need for programs that teach healthy boundaries in online and offline relationships and stressed the importance of seeking professional help for intense emotions. For the families involved, life moved on, but it was forever altered. Uni's loved ones would never be the same, just as Sonho's family had to live with the aftermath of his actions. The once innocent online connection had ended in tragedy, leaving behind only questions and regret. Sonho, now a man imprisoned for life, faced the consequences of his choices, while the damage to Uni's life, her kindness and openness, had been irreparably taken in a single violent moment. In the years that followed, the community reflected on the importance of emotional health and the need for greater understanding and support to prevent such heartbreaking events from recurring. The memory of her continued to resonate within the community, with annual memorials held on the anniversary of her passing. Former students often reflected on her teachings, emphasizing that her influence extended beyond academics to life lessons rooted in kindness, empathy, and a genuine passion for education. They ensured that her legacy endured, inspiring future generations. Conversely, Sunho's story served as a stark reminder of how love can spiral into obsession, how emotional wounds might turn into destructive actions, and how the virtual realm can foster a false sense of closeness that, in extreme cases, leads to tragedy. His case became a somber example of the dangerous intersection between online interactions and human emotions, leaving a lasting impact on those who knew him and on the wider community. It underscored the importance of addressing mental health and relationship issues openly and compassionately in the digital age. In February of 2004, Singapore faced a case that exposed the complexities of human relationships and the tragic outcomes they can produce. A 37-year-old man named G. Krishnasamy Naidu and his 39-year-old wife, Chatrabi Donaran Asami, became the focus of national attention. Their marriage, marked by frequent disputes and accusations of mistreatment, was fraught with tension. Neighbors and friends recounted episodes where disagreements escalated into physical confrontations, yet they remained together, possibly due to societal expectations or personal convictions. On April 8th of that year, a violent incident shattered their fragile union when Krishnasamy, in a fit of rage, stabbed Chat twice with a knife. The attack left her seriously injured, prompting his arrest and formal charges. Despite the severity, he was granted bail and released pending trial, a decision that later drew criticism as concerns grew over Chat's ongoing safety. Krishnasamy's resentment persisted, fueled by personal insecurities, financial conflicts, and deep-seated anger. Meanwhile, colleagues described Chat as a diligent worker who strived to maintain normalcy despite her hardships. Just over a month after the stabbing, on May 17th, Krishnasamy confronted her again at her workplace in Tua Arm, further escalating the tragic sequence of events. In broad daylight, Krishnasamy launched a brutal attack on his wife, wielding a chopper and striking her multiple times in front of horrified witnesses. The ferocity of the assault was so extreme that she succumbed to her injuries shortly after the incident. The public nature of the crime and its savage brutality sent shockwaves throughout Singapore. Following the tragedy, Krishnasamy fled the scene but surrendered to authorities 9 hours later. He was swiftly charged with a serious offense under Section 300 of the Penal Code, which carries the death penalty for such crimes. During the trial, prosecutors presented evidence of Krishnasamy's premeditation and a history of violence directed at his wife. Witnesses described the events leading up to the attack, portraying a man overwhelmed by jealousy and anger. The defense argued that Krishnasamy was under severe emotional distress at the time and lacked the intent to cause death. However, the court found that the evidence pointed to a deliberate and calculated act of violence. Krishnasamy was convicted of murder and sentenced to death. He appealed the verdict, and in a surprising turn, the appellate court overturned the murder conviction, instead finding him guilty of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. This lesser charge reflected considerations such as diminished responsibility due to his mental state during the incident. As a result, Krishnasamy received a life imprisonment sentence. This case cast a stark light on critical issues within Singaporean society. It highlighted the devastating effects of domestic violence and the difficulties victims face in seeking protection. The fact that Krishnasamy was released on bail after a violent episode raised concerns about the adequacy of legal safeguards for at-risk individuals. The incident also sparked discussions about mental health, culpability, and the complexities involved in judging crimes driven by passion. In the aftermath, there was a renewed push to strengthen support systems for victims of domestic abuse. Advocacy groups called for stricter bail conditions for those accused of violence and better counseling services for both victims and offenders. The legal community debated the balance between punishment and rehabilitation, especially when mental health issues influence behavior. The tragic loss of Chhatrapati served as a sobering reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked domestic violence and the urgent need for society to intervene before conflicts escalate beyond control. It underscored the importance of continuously reviewing legal frameworks to protect vulnerable individuals and ensure justice functions both as a deterrent and a means of rehabilitation. As the case of Krishnasamy progressed through the courts, it became a battleground of legal arguments, emotional testimonies, and forensic evidence, all aimed at addressing the profound issues surrounding such acts of violence. In May of 2004, a tragic sequence of events unfolded that would leave a lasting impact. The prosecution sought to demonstrate that Krishnasamy's actions were carefully planned rather than impulsive. They depicted a man who, despite being released on bail following a previous assault on his wife, had used that period to meticulously prepare for his final act of violence. Witnesses who had been present during the attack testified, each recounting the horrifying scene they had witnessed. Several colleagues of the victim, who were outside the factory in Tua during their lunch break, remembered the moment Krishnasamy arrived. He had been lurking nearby, seemingly waiting in the shadows for the right moment. When he saw his wife step outside, he approached with swift, determined steps. At first, it appeared he might have come to confront her, But within seconds, chaos erupted. A security guard from the factory described in detail how Krishnasamy reached into a plastic bag and pulled out a shining blade. The moment he swung it at Chatrath, the first strike struck her shoulder, causing a deep wound that made her stumble backward. Her scream, raw with terror, sent shivers through those nearby. Yet Krishnasamy did not pause. He continued to strike with terrifying force as panic spread among onlookers. Another witness, a worker standing nearby, recalled being frozen in shock, unable to move as he watched the assault unfold. He described how Krishnasamy relentlessly attacked her, even after she fell to the ground. His voice trembled as he recounted the scene, emphasizing how the attacker seemed possessed by a violent fury. The brutality was so overwhelming that many witnesses were unable to react in time. When someone finally dared to intervene, it was already too late. Chatrath lay motionless on the pavement, blood pooling around her, her body bearing multiple deep, fatal wounds. The prosecution highlighted that Krishnasamy's actions demonstrated clear intent to kill. The fact that he had concealed the blade inside a plastic bag pointed to premeditation. He had waited patiently for the right moment, leaving her with no chance to escape. They also pointed to a previous attack in April, when he had stabbed her twice, as evidence that this was not an impulsive act, but part of a pattern of escalating violence. Forensic experts who examined her body confirmed that her wounds were not accidental or impulsive. They were deep, targeted, and inflicted with precision. Several of the cuts had nearly severed arteries, ensuring her survival was impossible even with immediate medical help. One of the fatal blows had almost decapitated her, illustrating that this was not a moment of rage but a deliberate act of execution. Despite Krishnasamy Nazim's defense team attempting to present a different perspective, they argued that he was not fully capable of rational thought at the time of the incident. His lawyer claimed that he had been overwhelmed by intense emotional turmoil, worsened by financial difficulties, marital conflicts, and deep-seated insecurities. To support this, they introduced psychological experts who testified that he showed signs of profound emotional instability, which could have impaired his judgment. One psychiatrist explained that Krishnasamy had a history of depressive episodes and emotional outbursts, often triggered by fears of abandonment. After the initial attack, when his partner distanced herself, he reportedly spiraled into irrational thoughts, feeling as though he had lost complete control over his life. The defense argued that his actions were not premeditated, but rather the desperate response of a man pushed to his limits. However, the evidence overwhelmingly indicated his intent. The prosecution pointed out that he fled the scene immediately after the incident, demonstrating an awareness of the seriousness of his actions. His attempt to evade capture, only surrendering after nearly 9 hours on the run, suggested he understood the consequences. If he had truly been unaware of what he was doing, they argued, he would not have tried to escape. Seated in the courtroom, the victim's family listened in silence as the defense tried to diminish the severity of the crime. To them, there was no justification for what had happened. Their beloved daughter, sister, and friend had been taken from them in the most brutal manner imaginable. They had lost her not only once when she survived the first attack, but twice, once when she was harmed and again when the justice system failed to protect her. The trial also prompted a broader debate in Singapore about the adequacy of protections for victims of domestic violence. Many questioned why Krishnasamy had been granted bail despite the earlier attack. Could her death have been avoided if he had remained in custody? Should stricter conditions have been imposed on his release? These questions weighed heavily on those involved in legal and social advocacy. As the case drew to a close, the courtroom was filled with journalists, activists, and members of the public closely following the proceedings. The prosecution called for the maximum penalty, arguing that Krishnasamy had acted with clear intent and must be held fully responsible. Conversely, the defense urged for mercy, emphasizing his mental state and proposing that life imprisonment would be a more appropriate punishment. The judge listened carefully to both sides, aware that the decision would set an important precedent. This case was not merely about one man's actions, it would influence how future domestic violence cases were approached and judged. In Singapore, the courtroom fell into a tense hush as everyone awaited the final decision. The culmination of weeks of proceedings had arrived, and the atmosphere was thick with anticipation as the judge prepared to announce the outcome that would determine G. Krishnam Naidu's future. Spectators filled the gallery, some members of the public following the high-profile case, others advocates for victims of domestic violence, eagerly awaiting justice for Chat Trabi D. Onaranasamy. Her family sat rigid, their faces marked by grief and weariness, eyes fixed on the judge. Throughout the trial, the courtroom had been filled with evidence, testimonies, and legal debates. The prosecution had worked relentlessly to prove that Krishnam Naidu's actions were premeditated, brutal, and deserving of the strictest punishment. Witnesses recounted in vivid detail the horrific assault on Chat, describing the uncontrollable rage that fueled each strike and the fear that had immobilized those unable to intervene. Forensic experts detailed the severe, fatal wounds that left little doubt about the attack's intent. While psychological evaluations acknowledged his emotional turmoil, they did not absolve him of responsibility. The evidence against him was overwhelming. In contrast, the defense pleaded for mercy, arguing that Krishnam Naidu's mental state had been compromised at the time. They portrayed him as a man overwhelmed by jealousy, fear, and despair, whose emotional decline had led to an uncontrollable outburst. While they did not deny the violence, they contended that he did not deserve the harshest penalty, emphasizing his deteriorating mental health and the circumstances that had driven him to act impulsively. As the judge began to read the verdict, silence enveloped the courtroom. Every breath was held, every movement paused. The judge carefully summarized the case's key points, the sequence of events, testimonies, and forensic findings. He acknowledged Krishnam Naidu's emotional distress, but highlighted the deliberate nature of his actions, bringing a weapon, waiting for his wife, and launching a vicious assault in front of witnesses, clearly demonstrating intent. Finally, the verdict was announced. Krishnam Naidu was found guilty of murder. The judge sentenced him to death. A sharp intake of breath echoed through the room. Some gasped, others sat motionless. Chat's family wept quietly, not out of joy but relief that justice was finally being served. The man who had caused such pain and taken their loved one would now face the full weight of the law. Though this could never erase their suffering, it brought a measure of closure. Krishnam Naidu showed no immediate reaction. He remained still, fists clenched at his sides, perhaps expecting this outcome or aware deep down that escape was impossible. As guards approached to escort him back to his cell, he lowered his gaze, fully aware that his fate was sealed. The case did not end there. The verdict ignited widespread debate across Singapore about how the justice system handles domestic violence cases. Advocates called for tougher laws and improved protections for victims, questioning why Krishna Nam had been released on bail after his initial assault. Many believed that if he had been detained earlier, the tragedy of Chatrath's death might have been prevented. Public opinion grew increasingly critical, with calls for stronger protective measures, such as stricter enforcement of restraining orders, increased surveillance of high-risk offenders, and better access to shelters and legal aid. Domestic violence organizations seized the moment to raise awareness, urging victims to seek help before situations spiraled into tragedy. In the months that followed, as Krishnasamy awaited his execution, his legal team filed an appeal. They argued that the death sentence was excessively harsh given his emotional turmoil at the time of the incident. The case was re-examined by Singapore's Court of Appeal, where a surprising decision was made. Although Krishnasamy was found guilty of causing his wife's death, his mental state had been significantly compromised. The original murder conviction was overturned and replaced with a charge of culpable homicide not amounting to murder. Instead of facing the death penalty, he received a life sentence. This ruling sparked renewed debate. Some felt the court had been too lenient considering the brutality involved, while others viewed it as a balanced judgment that acknowledged both the severity of his actions and his mental condition at the time. Regardless of public opinion, one fact remained clear. Chatrath's life had been violently taken, and no punishment could undo her loss. Over time, her case served as a stark reminder of the dangers posed by unchecked domestic violence. It became a case study for legal scholars and social workers alike, illustrating both the system's shortcomings and its potential for justice. Her name persisted in courtrooms and advocacy campaigns as a symbol of the urgent need to protect those caught in cycles of abuse. For her family, however, no legal debate could fill the void left behind. They continued to mourn, to wonder what might have been if intervention had come sooner. They bore the weight of her absence even as life moved forward around them. Meanwhile, in a prison cell, Krishnasamy Naidu sat alone, contemplating the irreversible consequences of his actions. His story was a somber reflection on accountability and remorse, a stark reminder of how one moment can alter lives forever. In February of 2004, Singapore was shaken by a case that explored the complexities of human intent and legal boundaries. It involved Mustasa bin Abdul Majid, a 33-year-old man caught in a legal battle following an incident at a local supermarket. This case not only highlighted the intricacies of criminal law, but also emphasized the importance of understanding the delicate line between lawful behavior and criminal conduct. The incident occurred on the evening of January 27, 2003, at Prime Supermarket on Tampone Street. There, Mustasa was observed taking a carton of Red Bull energy drinks valued at $21, an act that would lead to serious legal consequences. Maza left the store without attempting to pay for a Red Bull carton. When the store manager, Neil Leah, noticed this, he confronted Maza outside. An argument ensued, leading to Maza's arrest and detention under Section 380 of the Penal Code, which covers theft from a premises used for storing property. He faced the possibility of a 7-year prison sentence. The prosecution argued that Maza had taken the item without permission and with the intention of permanently depriving the owner of it, fulfilling all legal criteria for theft under Section 378. They maintained that his actions clearly demonstrated dishonest intent, which is essential for a theft conviction. In contrast, the defense offered a different account. They claimed Maza had an agreement with a supermarket employee who allegedly authorized him to take items on credit due to his financial hardships. According to this version, Maza believed he had the right to take the product and pay later, which negated any dishonest motive. The defense called the employee as a witness, but during cross-examination, inconsistencies appeared in the testimony. The prosecution challenged the credibility of this account and pointed out that no formal agreement was documented. Furthermore, evidence was presented indicating Maza had a history of similar incidents, suggesting a pattern of behavior. The prosecution argued that even if an informal arrangement existed, it did not permit Maza to take items without informing staff, especially since the employee involved was not present at the time. Leaving the store without notifying anyone was seen as a clear indication of intent to steal. As the trial advanced, it became clear that the case depended heavily on whether Maza had genuine consent and whether he possessed dishonest intent. The defense insisted that the prior understanding gave Maza the impression he was authorized to take the item, thus lacking malicious intent. Conversely, the prosecution emphasized that any such agreement was unofficial and did not exempt Maza from following proper procedures. In delivering the verdict, the court underscored that establishing dishonest intent is crucial in theft cases. While consent can serve as a defense, it must be explicit and relevant to the situation. The court concluded that even if an agreement existed, it did not give Maza free rein to take items without following standard protocols. His actions showed a disregard for these procedures, and the court found that he had the necessary dishonest intent at the time of the incident. As a result, Maza was convicted. The case, prosecuted under Section 380 of the Penal Code, resulted in a 3-year prison sentence, serving as a stark reminder of the complexities involved in legal interpretations of intent and consent. It highlighted the importance of clear communication and strict adherence to established procedures, especially within commercial environments. The judiciary's role in carefully examining the details of each case was underscored, ensuring that justice was balanced with the specific circumstances surrounding the incident. As the verdict was announced, public and legal analysts debated whether the punishment was proportionate, with some viewing it as excessive for what appeared to be a minor theft. Others believed the sentence was necessary to uphold the nation's strict laws and to reinforce the principle that all citizens, regardless of personal hardships, must comply with the law. The case ignited discussions on the tension between rehabilitation and deterrence, as well as the delicate balance between leniency and justice. During sentencing, Maza's background was scrutinized in detail. His defense team requested a reduced sentence, citing his financial difficulties and personal struggles. Court records revealed that Maza had been unemployed for several months at the time of the incident. He had previously worked as a delivery driver but lost his job due to repeated absences, which his lawyer attributed to stress and financial hardship. His wife had left him a year earlier, taking their only child, leaving him to struggle with mounting debts after borrowing from friends and relatives. His financial situation was dire, and a psychologist who evaluated him prior to the hearing diagnosed moderate depression, suggesting his actions were driven more by mental and financial distress than malice. The defense argued that incarceration would only worsen Maza's condition and proposed a probationary sentence coupled with mandatory counseling and job training. Conversely, the prosecution maintained a firm stance, presenting evidence of prior convictions for similar offenses, including shoplifting in 1999 and theft in 2001. Although these previous cases resulted in fines rather than imprisonment, they were used to establish Maza as a repeat offender who had failed to reform. The prosecution contended that leniency had already been granted in the past, and there was no guarantee he would not offend again if given another chance. After several days of deliberation, the judge sentenced Maza to 3 years in prison. While acknowledging his personal difficulties, the judge emphasized that the law must be upheld to maintain social order and fairness. While the court emphasizes the importance of upholding the law, it also recognizes the difficulties faced by those accused. Nonetheless, the justice system cannot ignore the pattern of repeated offenses. The judge pointed out that shoplifting, often seen as a minor crime, nonetheless damages businesses and undermines public confidence in justice. Given the defendant's history, the court prioritized deterrence over leniency. When the sentence was announced, Maza showed no outward emotion. He remained silent, gazing at the floor as the judge finished speaking. His defense attorney later expressed disappointment, stating they had hoped for a more rehabilitative approach. They argued that Maza was not a hardened criminal, but someone who had made a mistake and needed support, not just punishment. Outside the courthouse, Maza's family was notably absent. None of his relatives attended the proceedings, and it was uncertain whether anyone was waiting for him beyond the prison walls. A former colleague who briefly spoke with reporters reflected on Maza's situation, saying, "It's sad. He wasn't a bad person, just someone who lost his way. I don't know if prison will help or worsen his situation." Inside Changi prison, Maza quickly faced the realities of incarceration. Known for its strict discipline, the Singapore prison system closely monitored repeat offenders like him. His daily routine was rigorous: early mornings, demanding work assignments, and limited leisure. Initially, he kept to himself, speaking little and avoiding others, overwhelmed by his circumstances. For weeks he remained withdrawn, but gradually he began participating in rehabilitation programs available within the facility. He enrolled in vocational training, learning basic electrical repair skills, and attended therapy sessions aimed at addressing behavioral issues and decision-making. Though he rarely engaged actively in group discussions, he listened carefully, contemplating the choices that had led him here. Meanwhile, outside prison, Maza's case sparked ongoing debates among legal experts and social workers. Some viewed his sentencing as a necessary example of Singapore's strict zero-tolerance policy, while others questioned whether alternative measures like community service or monitored rehabilitation might better address the underlying causes of his behavior. Social service agencies used his case to highlight the need for greater support for individuals facing financial and emotional hardships before they resort to crime. The case also raised questions about the limits of the justice system in managing repeat offenders who are not involved in violent acts, emphasizing the importance of balancing enforcement with social intervention. As Maza approached the midpoint of his sentence, he found himself caught in a cycle of minor offenses and repeated confinement. The future beyond the prison walls remained uncertain. Would he be able to rebuild his life and find steady employment, or would his criminal record serve as an insurmountable barrier? These questions haunted him as each day in custody drew him closer to potential freedom, yet also to the daunting challenges awaiting outside. During the months inside Changi prison, Maza gradually adapted to the strict routines of incarceration. Initially resistant, he eventually accepted his circumstances, understanding that harboring resentment or regret would do little to alter his situation. He attended rehabilitation programs, though his involvement was mostly passive. Prison counselors described him as quiet and untroubled, neither problematic nor particularly engaged, simply surviving and counting down the days until release. However, mere survival was insufficient. The real test would begin once he stepped beyond the prison gates. In his final months, authorities encouraged him to join the Yellow Ribbon Project, a government initiative aimed at helping former offenders reintegrate into society. The program offered vocational training and employment prospects, providing a second chance. Maza was skeptical, aware from past experience that societal labels often lingered long after punishment. He wondered if this initiative could truly make a difference, or if it was just another fleeting hope. Despite his doubts, Maza applied for a pre-release job placement program and was unexpectedly accepted into a basic warehouse training course, which guaranteed him a job interview upon release. For the first time in a long while, he felt a flicker of hope. He wasn't certain everything would turn out well, but at least he had a plan, something he lacked before. As Maza prepared for life outside, his case continued to be examined within legal and social circles. Some viewed his sentence as a necessary measure, reflecting Singapore's firm stance against theft regardless of individual circumstances. Others questioned whether imprisonment truly fostered rehabilitation, suggesting that programs emphasizing counseling and financial support might have been more effective. They debated whether structured assistance before arrest could have reduced the likelihood of reoffending rather than relying solely on post-incarceration efforts. This discussion underscored a broader issue: how the justice system should strike a balance between punishment and rehabilitation, especially for repeat but non-violent offenders. Finally, on a humid morning in February of 2007, Maza stepped outside the gates of Changi prison, carrying only a plastic bag with his belongings. He took a deep breath, inhaling the fresh air of freedom, ready to face the new chapter ahead. Longing for freedom, he quickly realized that the outside world felt heavier than he had anticipated. After years behind bars, he found that life outside had moved on without him, leaving him without a place to call home or loved ones waiting. Having spent 3 years confined, he now faced the daunting task of rebuilding his life from scratch. The initial weeks proved challenging. Despite completing a warehouse training program, securing stable employment remained elusive. His criminal record shadowed him, causing many potential employers to hesitate or reject his applications without explanation. Some interviews were curt, others more polite, but the message was clear: once a thief, always a thief. A job opportunity through the Yellow Ribbon Project fell through when the company chose another candidate, a disappointment he had anticipated yet still felt deeply. With no steady income, he resorted to temporary jobs: cleaning, construction, day labor, anything that paid daily. Though exhausting and unpredictable, these efforts kept him out of trouble. He refused to give in to despair, reminding himself of the importance of perseverance. Temptation to revert to old habits lingered, especially when faced with the harsh reality that no one was there to support him. Justifying his struggles, he wondered why he should keep fighting when help seemed absent. Yet each time he remembered the years he had endured in prison and how he had survived that ordeal. He was determined not to return. During this period, he reconnected with a former prison counselor who had shown interest in his case. Through her, he was introduced to a small nonprofit dedicated to helping ex-offenders rebuild their lives. There he found a mentor, a man who had served time for drug-related offenses but had since turned his life around. Their conversations, simple yet meaningful, made him feel understood for the first time. He realized he was not alone in his struggles. With the nonprofit's support, he secured a modest job at a logistics firm that hired ex-convicts. The pay was limited, but enough to rent a small room in a shared apartment. It was not much, but it was his own space, a sign that he was moving forward. Over months and years, the memories of prison persisted, yet they no longer defined him. He kept to himself, avoiding unnecessary trouble, working diligently, saving what little he could, and focusing on the future. There were no grand transformations or dramatic redemption stories, just slow, steady progress. He was not seeking forgiveness or approval. He simply wanted to live. Still, the scars of his past lingered, and society's memory of him was not easily erased. Some doors remained permanently closed, but he learned to navigate around them, forging his own path. He was no longer the man who had once entered a supermarket all those years ago. He had lost much, yet gained something invaluable, a fragile but real chance to rebuild his life. One evening, as he walked home from work, he passed a supermarket similar to the one where his story had begun. He paused for a moment, gazing through the glass doors, contemplating what the future might hold. As he moved through the brightly illuminated aisles, his mind drifted back to a night in 2003, recalling a carton of Red Bull and the series of decisions that had steered him onto a difficult, often painful journey. He exhaled slowly, adjusting his bag on his shoulder, and continued walking without hesitation. His gaze remained fixed ahead, refusing to look back at the past he had left behind.